Yeah, they're actually. So you can still see some of the way up there, and then just go. Yeah, huge.
Can we be heard? Yeah, those microphones are on. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming out tonight. This is the annual presentation of the Harmon Arts Grants Awards. The Harmon Arts Grants are named after a mayor who is standing to my left at the moment, who instituted this program years ago. And it is to recognize and help with local arts programs in the community, arts, music, humanities. We get lots of applications. Unfortunately, we don't have enough money to go around, but and all applications were really, really well done, and we appreciate your asking, and we appreciate what you do for our community. So, Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I was just going to give a little preface more than I usually do. We established the program in 1986, so it's been going on for over 30 years now. And it was established at $10,000, and tonight's awards are $25,000. And I went on and looked at the tables, and so the $10,000 would be about $23,000 today. So the amount of the awards has just kept up with inflation, basically, to this point in time. We established them because it was part of the Parks and Recreation outreach programs, in my mind, that we were limited in what we were doing in that aspect, that we had really just the Sugar Creek Arts Festival and the high school plays done during the summer. Since then, obviously, the town has added much to its cultural format and does a lot more than that today. But I'm pleased that the council has continued to fund these. The programs are, first of all, for events in normal. They don't have to be in normal, but that gets you a higher point calculation in our minds. And they are to help children, seniors, and low-income people. That's a good part of it. I looked at the grants that we've given this year, and 2/3 of the grants are going to support specifically those kinds of activities, children, seniors, and low-income people. The other grants are going to lower the cost to the general public of those particular events. So all of the grants are used to defray costs and make the arts more accessible to the people in the community. With that, we will begin our presentation. I read the names, the mayor gives out the money. So, Brass Band of Central Illinois, Stan Kane. That would be a general public grant, but they want to defray the cost of people attending that particular programming. Crossroads Area Student Theater, Connie Beard. This specifically will assist students, high school students, in theatrical training in a family-oriented program. Further Jazz, Glenn Wilson. This particular grant is for use at the Normal Theater, jazz in connection with jazz movies, and so it's an educational program open to the public at no cost, right?
Some of them are.
Okay.
Just normal ticket costs.
Normal ticket cost, but you get the extra programming, okay.
Pun intended.
Heartland Theater, Gail. Reese Lovell. Reese is the artistic director, and Gail is the manager of Heartland. This particular grant is for original one-act play festival that's held. It is for Midwestern plays only, and it's first-time performance. So these are all premieres, and it brings attention to theater in the town of Normal. And again, this helps to defray the cost. It's only $5 to attend. Generally, it's $16 to attend. Illinois Chamber Music Festival at IWU. And this particular grant will be outreach to people in the community by the orchestra program that IWU holds it during the summertime. ISU Concert in the Quad, Steve Parsons. I'm not going to explain concerts in the quad if you don't know what it is by this point.
You should go.
ISU Jelly Printing at Sugar Creek. This Petty Fifhagen Boys, is that right? I don't know. Okay. This will be printmaking for youth up through to age 18 during the Sugar Creek Arts Festival. The kids can participate in learning how to do printing. ISU Shakespeare Festival, John Stark. The Shakespeare Festival has done a lot of additional programming for young people during the course of the summer. This grant will help defray scholarship costs for kids of low income and also help take the summer play into the schools during the year. I think John told me they could do up to 14 schools with this help. ISU, okay, I can't even pronounce this one anymore. Pub Unit presents The Mikado.
Mikado.
Steve Holly. Okay. This helps defray the cost of bringing people in to help put on the Mikado. University Gallery's field trip program, bringing kids into to the gallery for special educational opportunities. Kendra Pates. I think Trevor Ortman is coming up for ISU Symphony Orchestra. This helps with free concerts throughout the Twin City community during the summer at various locations, so people can hear quintets, quartets of usually strings, sometimes horns, by symphony members. And those events are all free at their locations. McLean County Arts Center, Doug Johnson. This grant will help provide music at Sugar Creek Arts Festival. Orpheus Mandolin Orchestra, Martha Tyner and Sarah Curtis. This is to help defray costs so that people can attend the performances. And I'm going to try to go because I've never been to a mandolin concert. So, Prairie Fire Theater, Bob Mangialardi. This grant allows Prairie Fire to take.
I can't find it, Bob.
Happens to me all the time. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
This grant allows Prairie Fire to take their children's opera into the schools. I think they take it into 40 schools during the course of the year. This grant helps with the schools in Normal. Share the Music, Mark Miller, $660. This program is novel. It takes old musical instruments, refurbishes them, and then gives them to low-income students or low-income children and youth so that they can have music lessons. So it defrays completely the cost of their instrument for them. Twin City Ballet, Julie Weidman. Okay. This grant every year helps lower the cost for a number of people, mainly young people, to attend the Nutcracker at Christmas time. USA Ballet, Michelle Holmes. This grant allows Twin City Ballet to go to social agencies and senior homes and take the programming out to the people who cannot necessarily make it to a performance.
We have an extra check.
Well, look at that. Well, why would they get another one?
That's a good question.
Did it all
How
look
does
at your?
Tiffany, does your check it?
That one.
He left.
We'll figure it out. Yeah. Somebody else has $1,500, and we don't know who it is.
Yeah. Going once?
Okay, well, thank you, everyone, for being here.
And thank you for making our community a better place to live. You do amazing work, and we're honored that we can do this and wish we could do more. Thank you. Got one more. Is there a representative from Easter Seals here? Yeah. Come on up.
There. I have Easter Seals families and, oh, up
Bring 'em
front?
right up here.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's right here.
Yep. So tonight, we have a proclamation honoring the 100th anniversary of the National Easter Seals Organization, and we have with us representatives of the local organization. Kathy, if you want to come forward here. I'm going to read the proclamation and then present it. Whereas in 1919, following the sudden death of his son, Edgar Allan founded an organization known as Easter Seals to highlight and address the health care and services needed of children with disabilities. And whereas in 1948, Easter Seals expanded its children's focused mission by offering residential camp for children with disabilities at Camp Heffernan at Lake Bloomington. And whereas Easter Seals purchased Camp Heffernan in 1989, now called Timber Point Outdoor Center, the camp on Lake Bloomington is recognized as a premier destination for inclusive camping, recreation, and outdoor experiences for those with special needs. And whereas since its inception, Easter Seals has strongly advocated for essential services and support for individuals with disabilities and diverse needs, to include the authoring of a 1931 Bill of Rights for Children with Disabilities that led to a government-funded disability services, and by increasing public awareness and support through its successful SEALs and other national campaigns. Prior to the passing of the Americans with Disability Act on July 26, 1990, Easter Seals was a leading advocate and actively lobbied in Washington and across the country for its adoption. And whereas Easter Seals has grown from its humble beginnings to become a leading national network of more than 70 community-based nonprofit organizations who deliver high-quality local services and support to help more than 1.75 million children and adults with disabilities and their caregivers and families achieve milestones, live independently, and fully participate in their communities. Whereas the town of Normal is well served by Easter Seals Central Illinois in Bloomington, as well as 5 other locations: Easter Seals at Timber Point Outdoor Center in Hudson, Easter Seals Central Illinois at Peoria, Easter Seals Learning Academy in Germantown Hills, Children and Family Connection Center, number 16 in Champaign, and Children and Family Connection Center, number 14 in West Peoria. Whereas Easter Seals is a strong partner with local, state, and federal government, corporations, foundations, and other sectors to provide or connect individuals and families to early intervention and childhood education services, autism spectrum disorder services, mental health services, respite, camping and recreation, and caregiving supports. And whereas Easter Seals continues the mission and commitment to service envisioned by its founder, who concluded that your life and mine shall be valued not by what we take, but by what we give. Now therefore, I, Chris Coos, as the mayor of Town of Normal, do hereby recognize Easter Seals and its impact over the past 100 years in the lives of families in and around Bloomington and Central Illinois, for its commitment to expanding possibilities for children with disabilities to ensure that every one of us can live, learn, work, and play in our communities. And embrace a vision that all people with disabilities and their caregivers and families will be 100% included and 100% empowered. So,
Thank
gets
you,
the
Mayor
plaque.
Coos. Reese is here with me. He's one of our Easter Seals kiddos. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And we have Easter Seals staff with us
Reese.
too. Give him a handshake.
Fist bump.
Good job, Reese. Thank you so much. I just want to thank the town for this recognition. We are honored to celebrate this nationally as well as locally. And if you'd like to see what Easter Seals is all about, we ask you to join us on Saturday, July 13th at 9 a.m. at ISU's Hancock Stadium for our Walk With Me, a Walk with Champions.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. Good job, Reese.
Is it one of those again where you're just like grabbing the tape?
We had a little glitch in our new rules tonight about public comment. We were to have a sign-up sheet up to 15 minutes before the meeting started, and we can have up to 8 speakers. And inadvertently, because we had Harmon Arts Grant at 6:40, the sign-up sheet was 15 minutes prior to that instead of 15 minutes prior to 7 o'clock. So if there's one more person who came to sign up to speak and did not get the opportunity to sign up, could you identify yourself? I guess we got everybody. Call to order a meeting for the Normal Town Council for June 17th, 2019. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
Mrs. Cummings?
Here.
Mr. Nord?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Here.
Mr. Preston?
Here. We'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Here we go. That's our list. We go to public comment. We have 7 people wishing to speak tonight. I'm going to ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes because we do have so many people speaking. And we take them in the order in which we receive them. Our first speaker is Ricky Lee Beneke. I would ask that you just state your name. I know I just did, and your city of residence.
Hi. My name is Ricky Lee Beneke. I am the Executive Director of Life Center for Independent Living, Lifestyle in Bloomington. We serve McLean County, which covers Normal. First of all, I just wanted to clear up a real brief thing. I just wanted to make sure that all the town council normals know that at no time has Lifestyle been in support of any changes in public transit that would be detrimental to people with disabilities. The primary goal of the Americans with Disabilities Act is an accessible, fixed route. Socioeconomic characteristics such as income, the availability of an auto, age, and disability status are characteristics indicative of a higher propensity to use transit and thus are an essential part of the market demand. Removing a route that serves an area densely populated with residents that make up a large portion of the above characteristics is not right and contrary to the ADA. In 2016, I, as then disability rights advocate of Lifestyle, submitted written comments to the Connect Transit Board of Trustees in opposition to the planned route changes at that time, stating the need to delay their plans to ensure that all stops are accessible to people with disabilities, that policies are firmly in place for reasonable modification request, and the possibility of additions or changes in routes are also be able to be commented upon in a timely fashion, I must add, now, in order for the board to receive those comments. This was done in order to ensure that the ADA is met and people with disabilities have access to public transportation and not be seemingly forced to paratransit services as their only option. Lifestyle has worked with Connect Transit for many years, both prior to that letter and after, advocating for the needs of accessible stops and accessible rides. Over the past 7.5 years that I have been employed here, Lifestyle has held numerous meetings with Connect Transit staff, attended and participated in transit advisory committees, held and attended and provided input at numerous listening sessions, offered technical assistance, and the list goes on. We have also shared any complaints that our consumers have given us to Connect Transit, complaints that go far beyond just the physical difficulty of getting to the bus. However, here we are again today, years later, advocating for the very same things. When will you listen? Access to public transit, fixed public transit routes, should not be something that people with disabilities have to fight for nearly 30 years after the ADA was passed. We should not be making it, we as a community, should not be making it more difficult for people with disabilities to access public transit. Continuing to shrink the corridor through elimination of routes, increasing fares, making bus stops accessible through a campaign that will take 12 to 15 years. No, that is not right. We should improve the infrastructure, we should improve the routes now. The segregation of people with disabilities onto Connect Mobility as their primary source of transportation needs to end now. Stop the elimination of routes that are essential to people with disabilities, seniors, those with low income. Revise the budget to ensure access to public transit, now, as it should have been done years ago, and appoint a person with a disability, preferably one who is transit reliant, to the Connect Transit Board of Trustees. Mayor Cruz, just a few minutes ago, you mentioned something in a presentation. You stated making people with disabilities 100% included. That is exactly what I hope we do tonight. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Angie Britch.
Hi, my name is Angie Britch. I live in Bloomington. I'm speaking tonight for myself as well as partially on behalf of my son, who is a resident of Normal. First, I would like to give you a thank you. I had written to you all at the beginning of May regarding the accessible sidewalk issue from Broadway all the way to Emack and Bolio's. My son is paralyzed, is in a wheelchair. We could not make that trip safely. We actually got stuck out front here of the transit center, which is why those cones are there, because the town engineer and utility department did go out, measured everything, marked everything in white paint. They've torn everything up now, and they're working on it. It began May 20th. So for that, I do thank you for looking out for our community members with disabilities. As far as Connect Transit routes and fares, I believe to change them will be negatively affecting our community. Riders are counted each time they board a bus, not for each trip. This is a very unfair way to count riders, especially those using the Olive route. The majority of their trips can be reached without a transfer. Other routes require up to 3 transfers, meaning one round trip can count as 6 riders. Also, ridership numbers that are being used in the recent reports were taken when many were not venturing out. It was October through February. What is that looking like if we were to count from spring through fall? As I said, my son is paralyzed. He is wheelchair bound. Due to a severe lack of accessible stops on the fixed routes and due to the transit time being capped by the ADA, multiple transfers are not feasible for him. He uses the Connect mobility service. A monthly pass is currently $65. Many of those riders are on fixed incomes, my son Bailey being one of them. Due to his situation, his SSI, his only income, has been decreased to only $30. $30 does not cover that $65 pass. There are 79 other riders at that same facility on Broadway in this same financial situation. They want to be out and amongst our community. They want to have their lives back. They want to be included and feel normal. To us, to all of you maybe, $2 might not seem like a lot for a trip one way, but to them, when they only have $30 a month, that is a lot. As I said, the residents with those sidewalk issues, once that sidewalk is repaired, our plan is to take a field trip. Everyone go uptown Circle and buy them some ice cream with the fundraiser that we're going to be doing. Our U.S. veterans are also among our ridership. Many of our veterans suffer from service-connected disabilities and receive a monthly disability check. This is not enough to live on, let alone pay for public transportation. Mayor, our veterans, your brothers and sisters in arms, deserve better. Why do we not offer free transportation to those most in need within our community? Please save the Olive route, say no to fare increases, diversify the board by adding riders with mental, physical, and developmental disabilities to that board. Our disabled and veterans and other individuals in our community need to be the voice of their peers. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mary Werman.
And if I could remind you to use the microphones, please. I'm Mary Werman. I live in Normal. I spoke at the last town council meeting regarding the Connect Transit's decision to eliminate the Olive route as of July 1st. I also spoke at the Connect Transit Board meeting the following night regarding the same subject. I asked the Connect Transit Board several questions and would like to share those with you. 1, what have they done to increase the riders on the Olive route? 2, how have they reached out to people who live in this area to see how to improve the service so they would ride the bus? 3, would increasing frequency help increase riders, since they've stated that more frequent times help to increase riders on other routes? The frequency for the Olive route is 60 minutes. Would running a smaller bus help to be more cost-effective instead of eliminating the route? Would different stops on the route increase riders? And would awareness of the route help increase riders? The last 2 questions I ask, I'm also going to ask you too, because it also falls to your responsibility if the Olive route is eliminated. What is there in your solution to help these 37,000 riders who live in the Olive route? How will they get places that they need to go for work, for medical facilities, for worship, for shopping, for childcare, and all of their other needs? And what happens to the riders who have mobility issues, who are unable to walk to the alternate stop, but don't qualify for the mobility service? You can help the riders by delaying the approval of the Connect Transit budget until resolutions can be discussed and acted upon. Remember, these riders that we're talking about are residents of the town of Normal, which you govern. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Deborah Hutchins.
My name is Deborah Hutchins, and I bought my first house in Normal 10 years ago this week. And surprise, surprise, I'm going to talk about transit. When I bought my house, I was living in California, and I was house hunting literally with a bus map in front of me and checking Realtor.com and Zillow. I got it down to 3 houses. 2 of them are now more than a mile away from the nearest bus stop. Luckily, I chose the 3rd one. Part of the problem I see is we don't have a good voice on the transit board. As I understand it, Bloomington gets 3 seats and we get 2 in Normal. And we haven't bothered to fill it. Which means if there's any decision, say if the choice were to eliminate the Olive route, which everybody talks about, and say the Gold route, which is its counterpart in Bloomington, guess which way the vote's going? 3-1 to eliminate the Olive branch, or Olive route. We need to have some people representing us. I use the bus for everything. I don't drive anymore. I take it to my work at the county clerk's office. I take it down to the historical museum where I volunteer, where I've done research for your brother, by the way. I buy all my groceries and haul them home on the bus. And it's gotten harder since they changed. I got to tell you, though, there is one person that was thrilled with the changes, and that's the owner of Red Top Cab. I've had to give them a lot of business. But I think we need to appoint somebody that'll represent Normal. I'm available. Why not somebody who uses the bus all the time? I would hate to take a poll, but how many of you ride the bus every day? I do. And I really think we need to have somebody speaking up for Normal and somebody who rides the bus. Thank you.
I generally don't comment on public comment, but just well, point of clarification, Normal has 3 appointees and Bloomington has 4. But the ratio, I understand your point on the ratio. Our next speaker is Nancy B. Littell. Can somebody move that chair?
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Littell. I am from Bloomington, but I had hoped to use the regular fixed route transit, but when the bus stops were changed shortly after we moved back to Bloomington, the bus stops that I have to use to get on the bus and to get off the bus are too dangerous for me to use, so I am forced to use the Connect Mobility. I'm grateful to have the Connect Mobility, but there are a number of problems with it, and I'm asking your council that has the ability to appoint people to the board, to appoint someone, and I don't care whether they're regular transit riders or mobility riders. Obviously, I'm disabled from birth, so I know more about the mobility. But we have a saying, nothing about us without us. And that was for my special education students. We didn't have meetings without our children, especially the older children of there. And when my husband was disabled and we had family meetings, he was always involved, whether he was capable of making decisions or not. Obviously, you would want to appoint someone who could make decisions, but you need to have the input of the people who actually use the service, because I know that you make good decisions based on what your experiences, but sometimes able-bodied people make decisions that they think are good that really don't make sense for those who are disabled. And again, disability runs from one end of the spectrum to the other, so what works for the one at my thumb end of the spectrum doesn't work for the one at the other end, but everybody needs to have that voice. I wanted to also say that everyone who spoke before me spoke very eloquently. Today I had a doctor's appointment at OSF on College, and I looked at the bus stop where I would have gotten off had I had to take Connect Mobility. And there's no wheelchair cut. I would get out, it used to be mud, now they have mulch there, which is an improvement. But I would have to ride along the curb all the way up to the corner to get to a wheelchair cut. I couldn't even get down into the street. And the problem is that the landscaping, which is lovely, but it comes, there would be places where I would have to literally push through the shrubbery to be able to get to that point. And it's also it's not flat. It leans down toward the street. So if my wheelchair did fall into the street, I could go then in the street to get up to the wheelchair cut. But that's not the only place where that is that kind of stop sign. That is definitely not ADA approved. And it didn't used to be that difficult to use the regular bus. So please, please consider appointing people who use the bus, who can give you good information. And I do thank you that we do have the bus. I have a friend who lives in Bloomington. I have to admit he's in Bloomington, but he goes to work every day. But because he lives more than a mile from the nearest bus stop, he has to pay $4 one way or $8 round trip. And of course, he has a very minimum wage job. I don't understand why you keep making the footprint smaller so that more people have to pay more. But those are some of our concerns. And if I have time, I have one last one. They have a 30-day pass, which works well for people who have to go to work. every day. It doesn't work for me because I am retired now. I'm ill a lot of the time and can't travel. So it doesn't make sense for me to have a 30-day pass. They're planning to have a pass that you pay X amount of money and have so much money, and then it's deducted. And it does not have an ending date, so I can use that. That works well for me, but it does not work well for the people who work on a daily basis. And so one of my requests is, please use both of them. And I don't know what the financial implications are or how anybody else feels about it, but I think both are needed. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, and we love our public transportation. We want to make it the best it can be. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Shirley Craig.
Sorry, microphone. My name is Shirley Craig, and I live in Normal. I am a member of the Connect Transit Advisory Committee. I sought to join this group as a person who is passionate about the need for mass transportation and out of concern for the system in Bloomington Normal. I began riding the local system in elementary school when our family had one car. Thanks to transit, I was able to get to events at our church and to the Old Withers Public Library. And no, the buses didn't stop at every corner. There were fixed stops, and you had to be at the bus stop on time. When I went to Illinois Wesleyan, my father gave me an old car to use. I turned it back to him within a matter of weeks, as I preferred to walk and use transit. Fast forward many years, and my daughter began taking classes at Heartland and ISU while in her senior year of high school. Instead of going and buying her a car, she used my car, and I took transit to work. That car is now 16 years old, thanks to the ability to take transit for short trips around town. The lack of stop-and-go driving saved gas, brake repairs, and repair costs. As I look to the future and listen to comments by members of both city councils, I am afraid. I am afraid for those who rely on Connect Transit to get to work, to shopping, to medical visits, or just to visit friends. Afraid for those who, like myself, are using transit to save money, especially with a July 1 increase of 19 cents a gallon in the Illinois gas tax. I thank heartily those members of this council who have voted against delaying payment of the budgeted amount to Connect Transit. For the two council members who have pushed that idea, I ask you to consider the impact if Connect Transit ceases to exist. Uber and Lyft cannot replace transit service to the handicapped. Uber and Lyft may only be accessed via smartphones, which many elderly do not own. With Uber and Lyft, a rider-driver relationship is never established, and indeed, riders have no idea if a driver has been background checked. Yes, it's sad that the Olive Loud is being eliminated. I personally hope that transit will be able to find a way in the future to rework this route. I feel it could succeed if one of the stopping points is Uptown Station. Fare increases? It would be lovely if rate increases didn't have to occur, but very little in life is fixed or goes down in price, and that hurts everyone. However, the hurt is less than the devastation which would be caused by no transit system in Bloomington Normal. Thank you.
And our final speaker tonight is Terry Morgan.
Hi. As a native of McLean County, I was born in the original St. Joseph's Hospital in Bloomington, Illinois, Terry Lynn Morgan. I was raised in Leroy and graduated in 1980 from Illinois Wesleyan University. And over the past 6 years, I have been part of the Connect Transit bus system as a passenger with disabilities. I had to return back to this area and retire on disability, and so did have the privilege of attending the fourth Tuesday evening meeting of the Connect Transit Board of Trustees in February of 2019, and indicated my interest as being someone who I felt was qualified and would like to be considered as the appointee for the town of Normal to participate on the board. And as I've followed my career to several major metropolitan areas, I also have experience as a passenger in larger transit systems such as Denver, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Chicago. And so I'm not sure when you've scheduled the decision to make your appointment. And so hopefully I'm making this introduction in, and I apologize, a delayed, but hopefully somewhat timely manner, as I've got a very good friend whom I've spent considerable amount of time with. She's low vision and is not able to drive, gets around incredibly. I mean, she's amazing with her rolling walker. But as I have accompanied her in taking the Connect Transit buses, whether it be mobility or the fixed routes, I have personally witnessed a lot of situations and instances where there are a lot of different groups in both municipalities, the town of Normal as well as the city of Bloomington, that I would like to share my comments with, such as the city engineers and different ones who are responsible for like the curb cuts and signage and what have you. And also, I extensively rode Connect Transit the first 2 years I was a resident in Normal, which would have been 2013 and 2014, prior to having my vehicle back in service. And so I was at the mercy of whatever routes Connect Transit had to offer. And so I would like to suggest, and hopefully later this evening we'll be able to hear some of the recommendations possibly that Isaac can offer to some of the routes that we had prior to, I believe it was probably August of 2016 or 2017. If we could go back to some of those routes and make adjustments from that point, I think that a lot of the ridership, the citizens and the persons with disabilities would be much better served.
Thank you. We move on to the omnibus agenda. Items considered routine and will be handled with one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. I'd like to be excused from voting on any bills I may have incurred in my duties as mayor. Ms. Gummings?
I would also like to be excused from any bills that I may have incurred.
Thank you. Mr. Nord?
I'd like to pull the omnibus budget.
The entire budget?
The entire budget.
Or the entire agenda?
The bills? Well, the bills.
Oh.
Just the bills, sorry. Item, what was that, A?
B.
Move approval.
Second.
Items being handled by the omnibus vote are approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of June 3rd, 2019, resolution approving an amended final development plan for the Constitution Trail Center PUD having to do with Jiffy Lube, and a resolution conditionally approving the final plat for the 8th addition to the Constitution Trail Center subdivision, also having to do with Jiffy Lube. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. Item B, which was pulled by Mr. Nord, is the approval of a town of normal expenditures for payment as of June 12th, 2019. Mr. Nord?
Ready to talk?
Move it. Could you move-
I move to pull item B.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Nord?
I just have a couple of questions, more clarification. On page 2, the Ecology Action Center outreach, is that an annual payment, or is this monthly or reimbursement for?
Mr. Nord, I believe that program, the Ecology Action Center program, is for the education. I believe this is the annual expense for that particular program. We work with the Ecology Action Center to manage a number of initiatives. I believe this is the annual expense for that particular project.
Okay. Then the Uptown rent, I don't know if you got my email before, but how many folks do we have that are on that floor?
In terms of staff members
Staff
that work
members.
in that space? Well, I'm going to guess around 20. We've got 3 different departments in that space. I
Okay.
don't know for certain.
Sure. I believe that's probably fairly close, because that's what it was, a few months ago when I asked. But this is rental. There's 13,000.
Nord, is there something new you want to add to this issue? Because this question has been asked repeatedly at council meetings before. So is there something new that you want to bring to the table on this issue?
Oh, there is. There's 13,780 square feet that we have divided by 20 people. That's 689 square foot per person. The average rent, or the average square footage per person for commercial office space is less than 200. So we're spending, or we have 689 square foot per person. This is rental. There's lots of issues that we have that we need money for. We pay lots of money for this. We need to start the process to start finding someone else to rent this. This issue was first brought up 3 months ago. Since then, we've spent $105,746 that we will never get back. It's going to be a process to get out of that space, whether it's finding a subletter or what that is. So I will vote to approve this budget when we start the plan to find a way out to reduce the expense for taxpayers.
I think your calculation per square foot is a little skewed, Mr. Nord, because people come and go for meetings, for approval of projects. They bring in multiple people for plan review, for inspections, things like that. You're not taking those people into account in your calculation.
Okay. Fair.
Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
No.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The item is approved. That concludes our omnibus agenda. We have no general orders tonight. Our first item of new business is a presentation by Connect Transit.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and introduce while the Connect Transit folks come forward. Following council conversation, we invited Isaac Thorne, who's the general manager of Connect Transit, to come to council, talk about Connect Transit operation, share information regarding not only the recent board decisions, of the Connect Transit Board, but also just to understand a little bit more about Connect Transit. So I will turn things over to Isaac and make sure, first of all, that your technology is working, and then I'll let you do the introductions. Isaac.
Technology is not working. There we go.
Oh, here we go. I was going to
There
say,
we
it's
go.
up on the screen, but now we're all set. We've got it on our screens as well.
Mayor and council members, thank you for allowing Connect Transit to address the council. I'm Isaac Thorne, General Manager for Connect Transit. I have with me tonight Interim Chief Operating Officer Martin Glaze and Board of Trustee Julie Heil. We will try to address a lot of the false and misinformation tonight during this presentation. We'll also discuss Connect Transit's fixed route rider profile, transit propensity map in Bloomington Normal created by the McLean County Regional Planning Commission, the route restructure, ridership trends, Connect Mobility Service, Connect Transit Advisory Committee, fares, bus stops, and then recent route changes, and then the Connect to the Future Working Group. Near the end of the presentation, I'll provide a solution for bus service on West Orlando Avenue that will address the concerns that the Connect Transit staff and board have heard regarding customers that aren't able to make it to the Main Street bus stop for the yellow. I want to start off by saying we are not a perfect transit system. We are a good transit system, and we are always seeking to become better. So the fixed route rider profile was created by McLean County Regional Planning Commission through the short-range transit plan for Connect Transit. I just want to start off by saying we are serving a transit-dependent population here in Bloomington Normal, and our routes are aligned to serve transit-dependent population. 47% of the respondents are under the age of 24 years old. 31% of the respondents are students. And then communities of colors make up the majority of transit ridership. 45% are white, 49% are African American, and the other racial groups make up 3%. The next slide is the transit rider profile. This information was taken from our 2018 rider survey conducted in April of last year. 92% of our riders reported incomes of less than $50,000, and of those, 50% reported incomes under $15,000. The majority of non-students are employed, 70% are employed full-time. And then current ridership is transit dependent. As I said, 55% of riders do not have valid driver's license, and 86% take the bus more than 3 times per week. Transit propensity map, as I said, identifies areas with higher than average transit markets. I'm sorry, I'm very confused with all the paperwork in front of me. McLean County Regional Planning applied 10 variables obtained through a variety of local and national data set trends. Those 10 attributes analyzed for transit propensity were the following: student apartments and dormitories, subsidized housing units in mobile homes, assessed value of under $40,000, Connect Mobility drop-off and pickup locations, housing density, senior tax exemptions, job density, key transit destinations, and medical centers. 74% of all the high-frequency bus stops are within low or moderate income block groups, while 66% of our bus stops fall within these block groups. And so here's the map on the left is the transit propensity model. This is the model that McLean County Regional Planning took from those 10 attributes that determines likely transit user ridership. And then the map on the right is our fixed route bus network overlaid on top of that. So what this shows is that where the transit propensity is, where transit-dependent populations live, work, and use transit, our routes are aligned with those areas. And I will turn it over to Martin to talk about the route restructure.
All right. Hello. Good evening. My name is Martin Glaze, the Interim Chief Operating Officer. Just to give you a little background, I've been with Connect for about 5 years now. Started as a operations supervisor, just overseeing our drivers and our dispatchers. So I saw the routes as they were. I saw the operations as they were. I went through the process, and I've seen them since then. Our general manager, Isaac Thorne, he's been with Connect for 12 years, so he's seen it all as well, way more than I have. So why do we do it? Why do we do a route restructure? Why do we do a comprehensive operational analysis? Connected just won an award in 2015 for outstanding transit in a small-sized area. So that award was actually based on 3 years of progress that we had made. Much of it was operational and internal controls. Ridership, routes, that was only one small factor of it. Others included employee diversity, financial management, implementation of bus tracking software, paratransit software and efficiency, fixed route stop initiative, public outreach, marketing, and actually the footprint to the COA initiative. Best practices for transit agencies is to perform a comprehensive operational analysis, I'll refer to as COA from now on, every 5 to 10 years. Basically, it looks at the footprint and the makeup of the community and says, where has it grown? Where has it shrunk? And it realigns, are we hitting the same goals? Are we achieving the same goals that we had set out? So Connect Transit had never done this. So we started with a couple routes. We kept building and building and building. You run out. Everything got too tight. We didn't base any of our decisions on data, on tracking. We basically listened to the community, which you should do, but people said, hey, I would like service over here. All right, we'll fit it in a route. Well, I want service over here. All right, we'll fit it in a route. We got to a point where we couldn't fit anymore. It was too tight. Everything ran late. Our complaints were out of control. Our on-time performance was abysmal. So we said we have to break it down and relook at where are people going. Is the long 2-hour route, is it actually serving what it's meant to serve? Is it getting people from one end to the other? Is that actually where they're going? So we looked at that. The routes were designed based on best practices. So the COA, we wanted best practices. We also wanted to coordinate with municipalities, with the county. There was no coordination, so if the town, the city wanted to build a new low-income housing complex, guess what? Just throw it on any route because every route gets an hour service. Doesn't matter. Now we say, no, these are the areas, these are the corridors that have half an hour service, that have 15-minute service. If you want to build a business that has transit-dependent workers, customers, then you build here. If you want to build housing that's transit-dependent, you build it here. We can't go everywhere, and we're never going to be able to. It costs too much. Also, in 2016, right as the COA was developing, our ridership started to drop almost 200, or actually over 200,000. Gonna go to the next slide. So the COA process, how do we do it? We hired Nelson Nygaard, a transit consultant, and they've conducted these for many transits around the country. Peoria actually just hired them, or they're in the process of doing a comprehensive operational analysis for the same thing. They have it up on their website right now. They held engagement sessions along with us to explain the process and receive input. We did rider surveys. We found out where people were traveling to, what was their origin to destination, where are the routes getting people where they need to be. Riders continued to ask for more frequency, better on-time performance, and span of service. What time it starts in the morning, what time it ends at night. These are the same 3 requests that even the last 2 surveys our riders continue to ask for. They want on-time buses, they want frequent service, and they want a bigger span of service. Nelson Nygaard compiled census data on income, vehicles per household, density, etc. Very similar to the one that McLean County Regional Planning did. They used census data, they used work data. They put that all, we looked at it as a holistic approach. The initial draft on the routes and Sunday service were presented to the public. We had multiple meetings and some changes were made based on public input. We had more engagement sessions and online feedback. Overall, Connect performed almost 100 meetings and engagement sessions during this process. The routes were developed with guiding principles. Why do you create a route and how do you create a route? What makes a good route? It's based on criteria. It needs to be simple, it needs to be direct, it needs to be symmetrical. These are processes that we take into account anytime we look at altering a route. Public transit can never be everything to everyone. I think that's really important to understand. Unless we have an infinite amount of money, we cannot serve everyone the way they want to be served. It is impossible. We have to make decisions. Every change we make will affect a dependent transit rider because our ridership is mostly transit dependent. So again, if I go on this street instead of this street, it affects someone over here, and vice versa. Every decision we make, every route change we make is going to affect a transit dependent person. We have tried to meet in the middle. So there's 3 ways you can look at it, and it's kind of a sliding scale. If you want to go door-to-door service and cover everyone, you're going to have poor quality, it's going to be slow, and you're never going to do it because it costs too much. So you try and meet in the middle, get a balanced approach, which is where we are, is we try and increase frequency on the most dense areas and still provide the coverage for those that are outside the areas to get into the dense areas. We try to provide good service to the most amount of people. If you go all frequency, that's a little too far. Now you're only providing a 5-minute shuttle up and down Main Street, and that's it. Now you're serving the most dense area, you're giving them unbelievable service, but you're missing a lot of people. So we didn't want to go that far. We wanted to be in the middle. I want to reiterate, again, I can't say it enough, every change that we make, everything that we implement affects a transit-dependent rider, either positively and negatively. We have to evaluate our resources, our performance, and goals and adjust accordingly. We cannot make decisions on a single criteria. We have to take a holistic approach. Everything that we know must be taken into account, all variables measured, and we do this by applying proven best practices throughout the transit industry. Otherwise, we're just sitting back and doing nothing. We have to evaluate our performance, and we have to try and be better, as Isaac had said. So, what did we see out of the route restructure? We saw many positives. One is utilizing dwell time. What is that, you ask? Well, it's the excess amount of time that's on the ends of each route. This allows the route to come into the transfer center on time, preferably early. It provides people a chance to make their connections. They're not rushing. In the past, everyone was rushing, and if you rode the bus, you know about our, hey, can you hold for 5 minutes? Well, every single route did that, and every single route was late on the next trip. So it increases on-time performance. It also increases health benefits for our riders, or our drivers. Our drivers don't have to sit in that seat and not be able to get up. They were rushing nonstop all the time, and they didn't know when their next break was going to be. This gives them peace of mind. It lets them calm down. They're more settled. They're more relaxed. They can drive properly. They can drive safer. They're not rushing. There's no time schedule that they say, I got to get there, I got to get there. They don't have a rider back there worrying about, am I going to get my transfer to make it to my job on time? That's stressful for our drivers. We didn't want that. It was less rush, more customer service. Our driver could take time and actually talk to the riders. They could give information. They could say, sure, this is how you get over here. Oh, you need help. Yeah, here's how you use a transfer. Here's where you can buy a pass. Before, they didn't have time to do that. Driver would have to do that while they're driving. Again, we don't want that distracted driving. Routes are shorter and more direct. That means people get to their location quicker. This is frequency as well. It allows us to put frequency on the paths that need more frequency if they're shorter. So I give the old red as an example. It used to go around ISU, and then it would do what the current red does. Basically, it's an economic route, goes uptown Target, by the mall, and down to downtown Bloomington. Then it went out to 6 Points in Alexander. That route didn't have the right frequency on it. You have high ridership at the college, you have medium ridership through the economic area, and you have low ridership in the rural type area. That's not a good allocation of resources, and I can't properly distribute the frequency that those areas need. They're also more efficient. Go to the next slide. So the routes are safer. We aren't turning as much. We're going down one straight path. Turns are hard to do in buses, regardless of size. We have better infrastructure because we're on bigger roads. You know we're going to keep up big roads a lot better than we are small residential ones. It's just how it is. Better traffic signals, crosswalks, better lighting. Again, all over the infrastructure is much better if we're on these larger roads. The rider experience has improved. We have seen a significant drop in complaints. We have also seen a significant drop in phone calls. On a daily average, we used to get 400 calls on the fixed route a day when I was in the dispatch area. 400 a day because people didn't know how to use the system. It was too confusing. Now we get about 180. So the new system is simpler to use. People understand it. And then obviously increased ridership. We always talk about ridership because it's one of those goals that you always want to hit, obviously. That means more people are using it, they like it, it's meeting their needs. Talking about ridership, we have 3 graphs here. The top one is Connect Transit, the middle one is our national peer agencies, and the bottom is our regional peer agencies. National peer agencies are those communities that are similar in size and demographic makeup who also have a college or university. The regional peers are Illinois Transits. As you can see, over the last 11 years, Connect has increased its ridership by 98.6%. We have doubled. The national peers are down 3%, and even our regional peers here in Illinois are only up 18.7%. If you look at that graph, do you notice a trend? Right in FY15, everyone peaked. Why is that? Gas prices. Gas prices were the highest they've been, around $3 to $4 a gallon, right in FY15. So everyone in the transit industry saw huge growth. After that, you dropped. All the gas prices started going down, so ridership started going down. But Connect bucked the trend. We're the only ones who have seen an increase in the last 2 years, while all of our peers have continued to see decreases. Also, I want to note, right in about FY15 is when Uber and Lyft really started to hit the mass market. Overall, nationally, Uber and Lyft has caused almost a 20% decrease in transit usage because transit can't be a door-to-door service like Uber is. They found a way to do that cheaper, so we have to do what mass transit does good, and that's move a lot of people all at once. One thing I forgot to note is that this year we are currently on track to be the 3rd highest ridership year ever. So we're actually going to beat FY16, and hopefully that continues. The graph that was brought up, it's been said by a few that Connect's ridership is inflated due to transfers. Well, we pulled the transfer data, and since FY13, it's dropped every single year except for 17 right there. So I don't know what happened, but every other time transfers are decreasing. So why is that? We thought, hey, you're going smaller, shorter routes, you're going to have more transfers. Well, that's true. We had planned on that as well. However, what we find is that riders want to take the shortest trip possible, the most convenient route possible. People that may have gone to, say, Jewel for groceries may go to Walmart now because it's closer. They're going to adapt to the routes because they're quicker. They're going to walk to different routes because they're quicker. Just because a route goes a lot of places doesn't mean it goes to the place you want it to go. The way transit trips are counted is by unlinked passenger trips. So the Federal Transit Administration defines a transit trip as any time a passenger boards a bus. Doesn't matter if it's a transfer, doesn't matter how many buses they get on. This is the way the FTA defines a trip, and it's the way every single transit in America relays their ridership data. Connect Mobility. So this has also been said that the route change pushed people from the fixed route to Connect Mobility. Data doesn't show that. The data from FY11 up to FY16 shows a steady increase. FY16 is when the route restructure took place. Yes, we continue to see an increase, but it's at the same trend as it was prior to the route restructure. So again, it hasn't actually changed the data. The trend is still continuing on a straight line. Just to give you a little insight as well, the average trips that occur on Connect Mobility are about 200 to 250 a day, and they average about 7,000 to 8,000 a month. This year, we're actually only going to see about a 2 to 3% increase. So that line's going to stay below the trending line. Why would we not want to push people to Connect Mobility? I've heard that too, that we want to push people on there. Don't know why. It costs a lot. It's door-to-door service. It's very personalized. It's $5.88 per passenger mile, about $32 per trip, whereas the fixed route is $1.37 per passenger mile, or right around $4 a trip. So we want people to ride fixed route transit as much as possible. Medicaid, we'll talk about this. So YWCA used to provide a service called Medivan, where they would provide trips for Medicaid-approved users for their medical trips. They unfortunately came on financial troubles. We helped lobby with them. We helped ask for support. We asked for funding. Unfortunately, we weren't able to meet those needs for them, and they ended up stopping the Medivan service in 2017. When they did that, Connect Mobility picked up many of those riders, all of them for a time period, and then those that could transition to Connect Mobility did. So what we looked at and said, why aren't we offering Medicaid, non-emergency medical transportation through the state? Called around, only rural transits were doing it, urban weren't. Later find out Rockford does it a little in their rural area, but other than that, we're the only two in the state that offers this. What it does is provides the rider with free transit because the state will reimburse through their Medicaid benefits. This process took nearly 8 months to be approved. One thing I had heard was that we were going to stop the program. That's absolutely not true. What happened was legislation changes were about to start in February that would have made all rides very difficult for the passenger. As soon as we were made aware of this, we reached out to local partners, Showbus. We reached out to Illinois Public Transportation Association. We reached out to all the rural providers. Many of them had no idea this was coming down the pipeline. And we actually were able to track down those that put this legislation into service and talked it through them, and they were able to change this. So they only applied the changes to ambulance non-emergency medical trips and not car or service car. So we were able to stop that for the entire state. Once we were able to do that and we knew it was actually adopted, then we hired the supervisor who was actually taking care of the Medicaid to be our Medicaid specialist. We happily call her the connectability specialist. We actually found out today that she was accepted by the, I'm going to read this, Non-Emergency Medical Transportation Accreditation Commission to be a member of their advisory board. So that was awesome for her. The customer benefits of the Medicaid is all qualified trips are free to the riders. So far, we've provided 4,000 medical trips in just 7 months. This equals almost $8,000 of savings that our passengers did not have to pay for a Connect Mobility trip. Our top user has actually already taken 270 free trips with this service. I'll turn it back over to Isaac.
All right, we're going to talk about Connect Transit Advisory Committee. The Connect Transit Board approved Connect Transit Advisory Committee in 2014. There's been statements made that the board doesn't have any representation or guidance from riders of the system. Connect Transit Advisory members are riders of both Connect Mobility and Fixed Route, and they're providing input to the board on policy decisions. Their purpose is to make the riding public transit a better experience for all, and to review major policy decisions under consideration by the Connect Transit Board. All CTEC meetings are open to the public and are led by me. They meet every 2 months or when necessary to talk about major policy decisions the board's going to be considering. And again, I restructured that committee in 2017 to make sure that riders of both Connect Mobility and Fixed Route were on Connect Transit Advisory Committee. So the next topic is fares. So Connect Transit is not a taxing authority. It doesn't have taxing authority. We're not able to levy taxes of property. So the agencies listed on this sheet are Springfield, Metrolink, Greater Mass Transit, Greater Peoria Mass Transit, Champaign Mass Transit. All 4 of these districts are transit authorities that are able to levy property taxes. Decatur Public Transit and Danville Public Transit are operated by the city and their respective municipalities. The one that I've highlighted on this sheet, this slide, is Rockford Mass Transit District. Rockford is set up, and similarly to Connect Transit, their intergovernmental agreement, they also do not have a taxing authority. And their fares are $1.50 for Fixed Route and $3 for Connect Mobility, and that's been in existence since 2009. So I think the board and staff has tried to make transit as affordable as possibly can, being good stewards of tax dollars. And I guess this example just shows that we are just this year increased to from $1 to $1.25. These other agencies are able to keep their fares low because they are a taxing authority and can levy additional property taxes. So the recent fare increase, the Connect Transit Board approved the Fixed Route fares from $1 to $1.25. The 30-day pass moves from $32 to $36. Connect Mobility increases from $2 to $2.50, and the 30-day unlimited pass is being replaced. It was $65. Is being replaced with a value card. All those are taking effect on October 1st. The board pushed off that fare increase until October. The premium zone areas. We are not required to provide premium service. This is service that goes beyond ADA paratransit, the 3/4 miles from Fixed Transit. So we set up premium zones of 1 mile and 1.25 miles. That is beyond what FTA requires of us to do. And there is an additional fee for that service of $3 for 1 mile and $4 for 1.25 miles. Both those services increase 50 cents. I'm going to have Martin explain the Connect Mobility service area.
Sure. So this map just shows the 3/4 mile from a fixed route. So the tannish area, that's the area that we're required by ADA guidelines to serve. The additional light red and dark red, those are the 1 mile or 3/4 to a mile and 1 mile to 1 1/4. These are areas that go beyond the standard ADA guidelines that our board has adopted in still serving these areas. These trips cost more because they go further out, hence the difference in fares. Any of the white areas that aren't represented are unincorporated areas.
Also want to mention the last time that the Connect Transit Board increased fares was 2007 when it moved from 75 cents to $1. So it's been 12 years since the last time we increased the fares. So Connect Transit Board approved the replacement of the Connect Mobility Unlimited Pass in favor of a value card. So the value card is going to be beneficial for all of our Connect Mobility users, and I'll get to a slide that explains that more. But the value card does not expire. It goes, if you buy one this month and it's $25, until that value is out, you can continue using it. And there's a discount per value. So you spend $25, you get a 5% discount, $50, a 10% discount, and $85 or $100, you get an 85 or 15% discount, which would cost you $85. This graph basically shows that around 80% of our customers don't benefit from a unlimited Connect Mobility Pass because the break-even point is 32 and a half trips at $65. A majority of our users also that are in the premium zone areas, which there's only 30 of those, but those individuals cannot purchase a unlimited 30-day pass because they have to pay the fare of $3 or $4 currently. And they're not eligible to use the 30-day unlimited pass. The other approximately 19% of the users typically use more than the 32 and a half trips and are benefiting. But above and beyond, the value card is going to give a discount to every single one of our Connect Mobility customers, unlike the Connect Mobility Unlimited Pass it does currently now.
And just adding to that, with the implementation of the Medicaid services, many of those trips are going to be free. So any of their medical trips are free, but others aren't. So they may not have as many that would qualify for the 30-day pass. It might not benefit as many people because, again, there's going to be a different mechanism for them to receive value in a free ride. So bus stops. That's a big topic right now. We used to have a bus stop in basically a flag down format. If you want to catch a bus, you went out to the street and you waved and you hoped the bus stopped. How do you tell it's a bus route? I don't know. There was no signs out there except for a couple. So you had to know where the bus was. You had to know what a safe intersection was. That was probably most of those 400 calls was, I don't know what a safe intersection is. What's safe to this driver and not safe to this driver. They might have interpretations, and telling a driver that drives a route that is 2 hours long, every single intersection that's safe, very difficult. We have to give them criteria. What also happened was it made the routes long. The timing was unpredictable. The route took longer. Every single time that bus stops, it takes longer to get to their end location. So if it's not predictable, it could stop 100 times, it could stop 10. That's going to change how much time I have to allocate as far as proper routing. I skipped some stuff, but if you were passed by that bus, so you were at an intersection that had a turn lane and the bus didn't stop because you didn't know a bus can't stop in a turn lane, well, now you got to wait for the next bus. That bus wasn't coming for another hour because the routes were extremely long. So I don't know how many jobs you're going to be able to keep or how many times you're going to take that bus when these are the types of things that are going to happen while you're trying to use the system. Many streets and roads don't have intersections. So when we say go to the nearest intersection, there's long stretches that don't have an intersection. That's where we did put a physical sign and said, okay, we'll pick you up here. It's kind of in between two stops or two intersections. This is where you'll go. Examples of these, West College, IA Drive, Rab Road, there's many others. So what we did was we implemented fixed stops. We actually put flags in the ground, so we limited the number of times that buses were going to stop, which means they're more predictable. We were able to schedule them better. Customers knew where to catch the bus. Now they know there's that black pole with the bright green flag on it. It kept the route times balanced. We knew approximately that the bus could stop every quarter mile. That spacing of stops is industry standard. So what if I can't get to a bus because there's construction, there's snow, there's no sidewalk, etc.? Well, we offer reasonable modifications to our system. Again, this is an FTA determined guideline, is if you're riding a bus and driver's going to drop you off at a stop that may not be accessible, you can ask to be taken up to the next intersection that is accessible. Same thing if you want to ride the bus. You can call in and let dispatch know. You can email. We have it on our website, and you can request an alternative location. As long as it doesn't put our driver at a safety risk, you at a safety risk, or it's an undue burden, then we can accommodate those. So many people have said go back to the flag stop. With reasonable modification for those that can't get to those stops, it basically is. The bus stop improvement process. So when we do want to improve these stops, and we do. We want all stops to be fully accessible. This is what it takes. We have to have site drawings prepared by engineers. That costs money and it costs time. It takes time. They can't go out and do 480 stops all at once. They need time to get these assessed. What do we want there based on ridership? Is it a shelter? Is it a pad? Is it a bench? That takes time to develop. We have to do research and we have to see what can fit there. We have to work with the city and the town once we do have a drawing that works, and we have to ask for permits. We have to get the permits, and then we have to figure out, is the area big enough? Are we in public right-of-way? Are we in private property? If we're in private property, then we need an easement agreement. So now we have to coordinate with the owner and say, can we build, and come up with a contract for that. All of these take time. We can't just snap our fingers and have them all done. We would love to, but it takes time, and we started that process almost a year ago, which I'll talk about. So once we have permit in hand, site design ready, easement agreement signed, then we have to go out and we have to contract for the work. So we have to go out for bid, we have to accept proposals, then we have to award. Finally, someone can start laying concrete. And if we do it outside of the summer months, then we're gonna have to pay more because they need special treatment and all that other jazz. So we don't have a whole lot of windows and a whole lot of time to do a lot of this. However, we did start our Better Bus Stop campaign in 2018. The board approved an $880,000 budgeted process to create better bus stops. What we did was we worked with CTAC, our Community Transportation Advisory Committee, and we prioritized. We wanted to look at the most heavily used stops first, those that would see the most improvement by the most people. We have to look at ons versus offs, how many people get on in a stop compared to how many people get off. People getting on a stop may need a shelter, whereas people getting off may not need a shelter. So we have to properly disperse our infrastructure needs. We want to look at ramp and lift deployment locations, what's going to work best, what's going to work within the city's plans as well. We have to coordinate this stuff. So far this year, 19 of our 21 planned stops have been approved. 120 will be done over the next 2 years. The ones that were done this year took more time because they were bigger and more complicated, and we had to get those done first. They took a lot of time and a lot of resources. Now we can start working on stops that need more minor improvements, such as just a pad instead of multiple shelters and things of that nature. Currently, Connect Transit is paying for these stops out of our federal discretionary or our capital funds. We're looking and applying for federal discretionary grants to be able to pay for them. So our capital funding pays for these. We would like to find grants if we can, because again, that allows us to do more with our existing capital funds. Challenges. These are some of the challenges that we deal with outside of all the permitting and easements and that. Connect can't improve bus stops on streets that don't have sidewalks. We could put in a pad, but it doesn't go anywhere. That's a problem. Currently, there's 70 stops in our system that have no sidewalk. There's not a whole lot we can do besides work with the city and town, which we are doing. I've gotten to know the Public Works Department very well. Connect is also not authorized to install crosswalks, but again, we are working with the city and the town to find out where there's opportunities for these. As the bus stops improve, we're actually going to come up with new challenges because then you have to maintain them, keep them in a state of good repair. So that means continued capital costs must be available to keep these up to date. We also need to clean the shelters, the windows, pick up trash, snow removal. That's something that we're trying to figure out. How do we tackle those challenges once we do have all accessible stops, all stops with infrastructure? again, one problem creates another problem. So we're looking at these challenges, but we're up for the challenge. Turn it back to you.
Yeah, so before I talk about the recent route changes, I want to answer two important questions. What is route service area? The service availability is based on customer travel distance to reach transit, and Federal Transit Administration states that if routes and stops are placed properly, then a majority of people in the neighborhood served by the transit system will be within a quarter or half mile to a transit stop or 5 to 10 minute walk. And additionally, what is duplication of service when we're talking about a bus network? This refers to a situation where two or more distinct routes appear to within close or overlapping proximity. Streamlining reduction is designed to control the duplication of bus routes to ensure that transit services are adequately and efficiently distributed throughout the system. So here we have a map of the yellow line, the olive route, the pink route, and the red route. And up at the top, the Red Express, is which the board approved to start July 1st. So the duplication of service is the yellow route overlaps the olive route on Main Street, and the pink route overlaps the olive route on Shelbourne Street, and then the Red Express will be continue serving Walmart and also the OSF Medical Center. Went too far. Oh, there we go. So olive and duplication of service, 53% of all rides share a stop within an existing route. Of the 46.85 remaining slot rides that do not share a stop, 100% are within a quarter mile or half mile of an existing stop. Round trip, the olive makes 39 stops. 14 stops average 0 rides per day, and 13 stops average less than 2 rides today. So this is basically a This is a slide of the olive route and the ridership on the west side of that olive route. This is the boardings and alightings at each and every stop of the olive. As you can see, the olive overlaps with the pink route on Shelbourne Drive and overlaps with the yellow route on Main Street. And this is the east side of that route. Again, all the boardings and alightings along the route as it travels to Walmart and OSF Medical Center. This is the yellow route, and what we highlighted here is the overlap where the olive and yellow route overlap on Main Street. The yellow route has basically twice as much ridership on Main Street as it does in Orlando, Northbrook area. And this is the pink route overlap on Shelbourne with the olive. Again, it has twice as much ridership on the pink route than it does in the olive along Shelbourne Drive. And this is the red route that serves Walmart, and then the Red Express will serve, again, OSF Medical Center. The red route alone has 39 ons and offs on one side and 88 and 44 on the other side. And this is just a map that shows all 4 routes, their cost, annual cost, cost per ride, and then cost per hour. And so here's the benefits of the Red Express. It runs basically a segment of the red route from Uptown to Walmart, and this is where we average over 500 plus daily rides. It's going to double the frequency to 15-minute service in a transit-dependent corridor. Red Express also has stops at College and Young Drive, where there's many, many businesses, Landmark and Visa, Landmark and Parkway. And this slide just shows you all the business locations along College and Landmark. And so this last slide is basically Connect Transit staff recommendation to the board for next Tuesday's meeting for a pink route deviation that would serve West Orlando Avenue. It would provide its service. This is a cost-neutral option, and that we're recommending. So the pink route has extra dwell time. It's interlined with the yellow. So what that means in interlining is the yellow goes to Uptown Station and turns into the pink. The pink runs its route, comes back to Uptown Station, turns into the yellow route. That's interlining. So the yellow is tight, but the pink has extra dwell time. or we're going to be able to run service to West Orlando every 2 hours. The pink route also services Uptown Station, so they can make transfers. And this is a great alternative outside of, for those individuals that say they cannot access Main Street and walk that distance from Orlando Northbrook. The yellow will still be an option for those that can. It'll run Monday through Sunday, and like I said, about 7 times a day.
Yeah, the big takeaway with the Olive, and there was a lot of data up there, so it's hard to really, zone in on that. You have high ridership there at Orlando Northbrook. Other locations, you're having 0 to 1 ride. So it's 0, 0, 1, 0, 1. Then you have some ridership there on the yellow. That's already existing. 0. Then you have the pink, which has some ridership, but again, it has an existing route. Then you have 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, all the way till you get to Walmart. So what that entire route does, what its purpose is to move people from the Orlando Northbrook area to the Walmart area. That's its entire purpose. There, along the path, it doesn't serve a purpose. So logistically, how do you move people from the Orlando Northbrook area right to Main Street where the yellow is? It's 4 blocks to 8 block walk. Transit, states that that's an acceptable area as far as routes serving that population, especially for a 15 to 30 minute route. That was why the decision was made, because again, the entire purpose of that route could be solved in that 4 to 8 blocks, but we were spending $500,000 to do it. And that's why it was hard to justify the efficiency of that route. And we wanted to try and find, we did find, hopefully, a solution that may fit.
So the last item tonight is I'm going to have Trustee Julie Heil talk about the Connect to the Future Working Group.
So good evening. First thing I want to do is thank you, Mayor Coos, and Council for the opportunity to serve as a trustee to Connect Transit. I do so with great devotion and with a lifelong interest in not only public service, but transit issues. As some of you know, I am a transit professional, among other things, and as is often the case, you don't get to do the thing in your hometown that you get to do in a lot of other places, and so it is very satisfying work to me to be able to serve the home that I love. I also want to thank you for giving us the time this evening to make this presentation. I am continuously amazed, both here and elsewhere, by the complexity of a good transit system. I see them as a real source of energy and lifeblood and economic development and mutual care and concern in communities throughout the United States and beyond, and certainly here in Bloomington Normal. And the opportunity to teach you and to have this larger conversation with you about the ins and outs of this transit system, its history, how we have gotten to be where we are today is very important to me. And I foreground my remaining remarks with that comment because this kind of education is precisely what the Connect to the Future Working Group is designed to create. So certainly as a means of capturing and making the best possible use of the public interest that has come toward Connect Transit since our March vote, we have put together Connect to the Future. There's a handout that we gave you at the beginning of this presentation that I would ask you to refer to. And I will tell you simply that I'm going to stick to that overview of the project rather quickly for this reason. I sit as a member of that work group, and I am working studiously not to get out ahead of where that group is going to go as we educate ourselves, coming up with a vision for what this community is prepared to support as the best system we can find. So I'll just direct you to this project overview, and I will direct you specifically to the questions at the bottom of the first paragraph, which we will face. How do we want transit to figure into the daily lives of our citizens? What do we want our mobility platform to be in our community? What opportunities might it offer that we have yet to imagine? And I want to just add that for the board and for transit staff, we begin with a commitment to our primary ridership, which is our transit-reliant ridership, our fixed income ridership, where we can invite others, sometimes called choice riders, into that system. That's only good, because the more of us use this system, the more stable it will be and the more potentially sustainable it will be. But we begin with a focus on our transit-reliant community. So when we say, what opportunities might it offer that we have yet to imagine, those folks are right in the center of that question. The next paragraph, the work group is intended to come to an informed understanding of where Connect Transit stands today, core guiding principles, ridership, financial realities and possibilities, and more, as we shape recommendations for the future, including strategies for the platform's financial viability and sustainment. In sum, what do we want from our public transit system and how do we get there? We are calling for a conceptual plan for community-wide public transit. The recommendations are to be wide-ranging and ambitious. We want to reach for the most beneficial platform our communities are willing to support and prepared to sustain for the long term. So that is our opportunity. I am looking forward to that process. We have given ourselves a schedule to end toward the end of this year, and certainly there is a correlation between that end point and the deferred rate increase on which the board has voted. I want to tell you just a little bit about the work group. This is it's a very important supplement to other opportunities for community members to inform the work of Connect Transit. So the work group, is that, I think, the next slide? Just membership of this work group. We have recruited and invited into the group riders, bus operators, contractual partners, ISU, the town, the city, the business community, and a member of our Transit Advisory Committee. And that's where we begin. We are scheduled to convene our first sort of organizational meeting on Saturday, the 29th of June. And one of the questions we will be asking in that meeting as we look around the room is, who else should be here? Who are we missing? Because what we want is a representative microcosm of this community. We want those voices in the room. We also have a list of, so we have a group of about 12 people at this point. We also have a named group of subject matter experts. Again, this is a starting point. We have government officials. We have Vasu and Teresa and Jennifer from McLean County Regional Planning Commission. We have LifeSil, and we have members of our community who have experience with other systems, most particularly systems who have gone to fixed routes and just tried to thread this needle that our system right now is trying to thread in order to become both as fully serving as possible and as financially sustainable as possible. In terms of the perspective that we are seeking on this group, we want a wide range of ages. We want wide backgrounds. We want to make sure that we've got a balance between Bloomington and Normal, and we want to make sure that we've got sort of if you think about the propensity map, we want to get a version of that map so that we've got representation geographically. So far, In April, we defined the project. We agreed as a board that we wanted to take this on as an opportunity in response in part to the community reaction that we had to our vote. In May, we began announcing who we had identified to join the work group. That work continues at this time, and by the end of June, we will finalize the names on that list. We also, Judy Buchanan, who is who is chairing the group, and I am her partner, met in the Normal Public Library with a group of 25 members of the community to review this plan, to hear from them, and to try to get a sense of what is needed going forward. And we began a search for a facilitator. The facilitation of this process, as you might imagine, is rather complex. There's a lot of strong feeling within this community about this topic. I think that that's going to serve us very well in the end. But we wanted to find a facilitator, and Isaac has been in the lead on this, but a person who has experience with basically community engagement, culture change, and transportation systems. And we've got a handful of candidates who have provided Isaac, as I understand it, with proposals, and we look forward to getting that outside expertise to help us be straight. We want a good third party to help us broker these conversations. I think finally I would just say that if anything, I have come to understand that Connect Transit is a living and breathing system. And I think our opportunity to engage with it as such and to make long-range decisions through careful conversation about what we owe ourselves as a community and how we can best take care of one another as a community, I only see positive outcomes as a result of that process. And again, I thank you for your time.
This time we're going to open it up for questions.
Thank you. That was an incredibly detailed presentation, a lot of data to digest there. So we will go to council comments and questions. I would like to caution the council to really not get into the details, but to think more holistically about policy. We're a policy body. We are not transit professionals. And to think in terms of the policy that we would like to see happen and in terms of service outcomes that we would like to see happen, and not get into why are we at this stop and not at that stop and things like that. So I will start with whoever would like to start. Ms. Smith.
Thank you all. In preparation for this meeting, I've been assembling a range of items on transit, from the audited statement to the proposed budget to the MRPC report. And
Ms. Smith, people are saying they can't hear you on the microphone. If you could, thank you.
I'm still confused about the use of matching funds. And because in the McLean County Regional Planning Commission report, it discusses that when municipalities provide dollars to transit, it does free up matching dollars. Can you clarify what that is, and are we accessing all of the funds that could be available to us with our current funding levels?
Yeah, so Illinois Department of Transportation for the DOPE application has basically given us $13.7 million. We don't use that full allocation because we don't have the matching dollars to go with it to get additional funding. So we only use about $9 million of that 13.7 total. So IDOT requires they're going to give us 65%, they're going to reimburse us on expenses. However, that 35% is made up through federal funding, through local funding for operations, and then fare revenue.
So, in essence, are you indicating that if the municipalities were to increase their funding, we might be able to get the full employer match to put it in 401k terms, that we are leaving money on the table
That's absolutely
under the present level of funding we're providing to Connect Transit?
Yes.
Okay. And in looking at the audit report from fiscal year 2018 and 2017, it stated that operating expenses were under budget in both years by more than $1 million. Are we having any luck in that capacity for this fiscal year by any chance?
Yes, we maybe a little bit under our budget this year as well.
By how much?
It depends on our last fiscal month of this year, and that's the month of June. Obviously, there is a lot of accruals that have to be taken care of, and we won't know the final number until the auditors approve our June numbers.
And I strongly applaud the efforts to provide the medical transport to step into a gap created under probably the state's lack of a budget in those 2 years that drove many social service agencies to the brink and then some. But does Medicaid reimburse for employment transport? I'm speaking in particular of a number of individuals with impairments that work 2 and 3 hour shifts at most, and if they aren't on a fixed route, they do rely on Connect Mobility to get them there. So at minimum wage, that is not a lot of income they are generating for that. So does Medicaid provide any compensation for those rides?
That I wouldn't know offhand. I would actually have to talk to our connectability specialist. She would definitely know the answer to that, but I don't have that right now.
Do we know whether or not the salary that is being expended for that position is going to at least be matched by recouping Medicaid reimbursement?
Yes.
And is Medicaid contracting with you to lower what they will pay as they do with many doctors and other medical services, or are they accepting the rates you are charging for those services?
So right now, we're only billing Medicaid through the state, and the state has flat rates. So they're reimbursing just on their flat rates. We didn't have to negotiate anything. We're not currently working with any MCOs. The MCOs have required additional training for our drivers, and that's something that we're still exploring. We hope to move into that, though.
Would you define what an MCO is, please?
Sure, it's a managed care organization.
Thank you.
On your planned fare restructuring, where you give greater discounts to someone expending more dollars, there are individuals in many communities that don't even have bank accounts. They don't have the credit record to get it. They're not necessarily great money managers. So in order to avail themselves of that discount, they would struggle to even come up with the first 5% discount. In the McLean County Regional Planning Commission report, there was discussion of the fact that there may be software available now that would track a rider's and their use of the system and cap their expenditures based on their actual use instead of having them pay up front. Has any effort been made to explore if that's available?
That's actually a great idea, and we can explore that with the fare capping technology we have to see if we can also offer that for ADA paratransit service as well. If they spend up to that $23.75, I think it is, they get the discount. So we can definitely look at that and see if that's a possibility as well.
I understand that State Farm no longer provides any kind of subsidy for their employees. Does any other employer provide support for their employees using transit?
Yes, so Country Company is a current universal access provider. They're paying us per trip. And we're working, I've had conversations with the Chamber as well to broaden that universal access agreement program to other businesses throughout Bloomington Normal.
Just FYI, under the recent tax code provisions in federal tax code, employer subsidies of transit is no longer considered a deductible tax business expense, and so it may motivate other employers not to be willing to do that, but perhaps employers could be willing to lend credit to the employees and take it out as an advancement. So you may have to be creative in your structuring of that.
Yeah, what we saw with that is they took it off of the tax credit for the business, but you can still do it as an individual. So individual could defer and put money aside out of their check and actually use that for transit. So they took it off the business and put it on the individual.
Now, in terms of the priorities of transit, in looking at the projection for the fiscal 2020 budget, the capital expenditures include provisions for a number of large buses. Are those equivalent in size to what is in the current fleet?
So what we're looking at, are you referencing electric buses?
Yes.
We're looking at options for both 35 and 40-foot buses. And
How big are the current buses?
current buses are 40-footers. We also have
Okay.
35-foot buses as well. Yeah.
Okay, so in the budget, there's provisions for 16 of these electric buses to the tune of 16 plus million over the next 5 years, while there's also pressure on Connect Transit to build the transit center in downtown Bloomington, which would address safety issues as well as possibly being an economic driver for that location. I've heard individuals comment that they see those large buses go with not all the seats occupied. Is there any rationale in going for the larger buses, or made it make more sense to consider having a mix of both large buses and shuttle-sized buses?
Yeah, so right now, we have 20 Connect Mobility buses, which are the smaller size buses. They're about 28 feet to 29 feet in length. And then I think your other question, I think we're funding for 12, and the funding for those buses is coming from a discretionary federal grant, and where we're leveraging federal dollars for that purchase. And we're doing it a little bit differently. It's a little bit complicated. So we talked earlier about the IDOT allocation, and we're not using all of that. So we're leveraging federal dollars with IDOT dollars as well to pay for these buses with no local capital money at all.
But would you restrict those smaller buses to Connect Mobility, or would you consider servicing some of the routes with those smaller buses?
It'd be difficult on some of our routes to service, to use a 30-foot bus on some of our routes due to our peak ridership levels. 9 of our 15 routes have 40 boardings per hour during peak service. So I cannot fit 40 passengers on that Connect Mobility bus. And then also individuals that have wheelchairs or whatnot, getting them onto the bus in any timely manner whatsoever would not work on those buses. The driver on a Connect Mobility bus has to get outside the vehicle and use the lift from outside the vehicle to pick up passengers that are in wheelchairs. So it wouldn't operationally would not function well.
What's the price tag for a standard bus as opposed to these electric buses that come at a price of $1 million apiece?
So I want to clarify this too. So a diesel bus costs around $450,000 to $500,000. An electric bus costs somewhere around $800,000 to $900,000. However, the electric bus, for the life of the vehicle, 12 years, you're going to see a $256,000 savings versus running and operating a diesel bus. That's the average.
Can I add a couple notes to that? So as far as the 35 versus 40, electric comes with different specs basically than a diesel bus. So we have to know how many batteries can it fit, how long are our routes, how many miles is that electric battery going to hold during the summer, during the winter. So we're taking that all into consideration through the bid process because we want that bus to fit our service. So that will be a factor as far as 35 or 40 foot on those electric. And then in terms of the funding, this was a grant by design, so we actually applied for this and said we want electric buses. FTA is not really giving out discretionary funding for diesel buses anymore. So if we want the federal government to pick up the tab and go through a grant, then we go with electric buses. California is already mandating that all of California goes to electric buses. I was at a couple seminars with, transit put on by APTA, which is the American Public Transportation Association, and all they're talking about is electric buses because over the lifespan you save so much money because of the fuel, because of the parts. There's not all the moving parts. It's basically a battery and a drivetrain. You're not changing oil, you're not changing out all the unnecessary parts that a diesel engine has. So you save that over the 15 to 17 years that bus is in service. You're going to save that. Going back on the financing for it, if we didn't get this grant, we would actually be paying for diesel buses probably out of our capital funds. So we're actually leveraging almost $16 million, and out of our capital funds locally, we're putting in what?
So right now, we're not going to put any local money into it because we're leveraging IDOT funding.
So 0 local funds are getting us 16 buses. If we went with diesel buses, it would be $8 million.
In terms of the McLean County Regional Planning Commission report, I was at the Connect Transit Board meeting when it was presented, and what I heard was not that the routes perfectly align, but that for the most part, the routes align with the transit density.
Yeah, absolutely. We still have work to do, like I said before. We're still working to improve that. I know there was some recommendations for us to better align certain routes, such as the blue route that's currently running from downtown to Target.
This is for Ms. Heil. So in the working group,
Yes,
will the opportunity present itself to consider restoring service to some of the individuals that were cut out of the previous restructuring, such as the mobile home parks and so forth?
I pause only because I don't want to seem that I'm dodging the question. I think this conversation is going to be a very broad and wide-reaching conversation, and that many options will be considered. I can't say for sure that any one option will be considered, but we're going to look at the health of the system as a whole and the riders that we're trying to take care of. So if as a part of that conversation, that part of the dynamic comes up, we'll look at it seriously.
And in
Ms.
terms...
Smith, I'm going to ask you to hold on your questions and give other council members an opportunity. We'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Certainly. Wants to speak? Ms. Cummings.
I don't want to belabor anything because it's already been a long evening and we've taken in quite a bit of information. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who spoke today as it relates to sharing your experience, your needs, your desires when it comes to Connect Transit. I'm going to start my comments off with this. Is my glass half empty or half full? We have an opportunity to decide whether we look at something positively or negatively. And I feel like sometimes we choose to see that I've drinking this till it's half empty versus taking a look at it being half full. I thank you, Isaac, for saying we're not perfect because even as individuals, we're constantly learning. I know since I've been on the council, I continue to learn. And I also thank you for sharing your knowledge with me and really getting me up to speed on just Connect or transit as a whole. Despite what many may think, I used transportation till the age of 24 years old. That was when I got my very first car. And so my experience wasn't with Connect Transit, it was with a larger city. And then not having transportation when I lived in Phoenix, but they didn't have adequate transit service. Those were my experiences, so I could not relate to where I am today and the location. So I appreciate you for that and reduces some of my questions right now. what I hope that we begin to do, and for me, I want everyone to know this sitting here, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. You may not get specifically what you want, but my job as a council member, along with the rest of my council members here, is to make sure that there are no gaps. How we get to that destination may not be how you like it. You may not go in a Porsche. You may not go in a Cadillac. We may have to take the Hyundai Elantra for a little while until we are able to put ourselves in something better, a Tesla, if you will. But in the meantime, we hope to get to the destination. And the destination in this particular case is ensuring that our community has access to transportation, that no one is left out. We understand that there are gaps. I try to explain to people this community was not built as a community for pedestrians. We know that. I've talked about it. I like to go and walk and run outside, and there's places in my community where there are no sidewalks. So we know those things exist. Those things don't happen overnight. I'm sorry. I wish I could be the fairy godmother from Cinderella and say bippity boppity boop and have it ready for you today. I do. But there's processes we have to take, and I've asked you before, and I'm imploring you again tonight to be patient with us. If you know of an area that needs work or that could be of assistance, let us know. But we will assist you with that. Also, one thing that I try to stress to people is we are here to work together. If you're looking for us to be adversarial with any of our partners, I will say from myself, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Because I'm going to work with them like I will work with you. I don't burn bridges, because one day I'll have to cross them again. I won't do that with you as our community, and I won't do it with any of our partners who help make our community better. Quality of life is so important to me. And so know that I have heard you. I am working to do my best. I may not be the loudest voice in the room. I don't need to be. But I am at every table. And that's what's most important to me, to make sure that there's someone there that's listening, that hears you, that can share, that is willing to learn, and try to fill those empty spaces and those gaps. We'll continue to work together. We'll continue to make this community better, because I still believe in my heart that this place can be a destination place, a place where people want to be and choose to be, not have to be. But it takes all of us in this room, and it takes us all coming together and being understanding on how we can do that. For those of you who have expressed interest in wanting to be a part of the board, if you're not able to be a part of the board, it sounds like it's open for a couple of advisory committees that they have. I'm quite sure there's ways that Isaac can share with you. Get involved. Don't let this be the only time that you feel necessary to get involved. Get involved and stay involved. Understand in this particular climate, a lot of people have political alternatives and ulterior motives. I'll just leave it at that. So not everybody's here for the right reasons. But understand that there are those who are here for the right reasons and who will continue to fight for you. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lorenz?
Yes, thank you. A couple of points that I want to make would be for us as a council to focus on what we as a council can really do. And before I get to that, there were a few points that I noted during the different points of your presentation, as well as from some of the public commenters at the beginning, that I'm just going to put out there as a potential list of things that I heard that your work group may want to make sure they address. The assertion that there's shorter and more direct routes. I've heard people at times speak quite the opposite, that it takes them quite a bit longer to get from where they want to go compared to the way it used to be. There seems to be a lot of question around the Medicaid benefit eligibility. Sounds like you've got a really capable person there, so to the extent to which they could really be an educator for the users and make sure everybody who's possibly eligible could take advantage of that. And then heard a lot about the 30-day pass and now being replaced by this value card. Again, I don't want to get into the details of it. I don't think it's the purview of this council to get into such details. But to make sure that ideas such as Ms. Smith said are floated and explored, and to make sure that that, in fact, is not an undue burden on the folks. So those are a couple of the details, minutia, that I just offered up as laundry list of things that I've heard, and would appreciate your group being able to address those, and I'm sure many more. So to the point about what I think we as a council should really focus on, clearly is representation on the board, and that is an active discussion, and it's high on our radar. Ultimately, the mayor will make a selection. We then will approve that. It is high on the to-do list, and I look back at my notes. Every one of the 7 people who spoke today, I think, made some mention about that. So that's being heard loudly and very clearly. The second point that I'd want to make of 3 is that we make sure that the staff, particularly legal staff, takes a clear look at the current intergovernmental agreement that was signed 7 years ago, make sure that the language is clearly understood by all parties, and make sure that it does not put the councils in a situation where we would become a transit board. I think that there would be some danger in that. I think we don't operate that way with any of the other organizations with which we have intergovernmental agreements. One example would be the Economic Development Council. So just for the sake of consistency, I'd like to see us get clarity around that intergovernmental agreement and clearly state in layman's terms what our role, and more importantly, what our role is not. The final point, I guess I'd like to say for council's address to be mindful about, is to make sure that we are facilitating all of the ADA improvements that need to happen. There was a slide up there that said about lack of sidewalks and crosswalks and maintaining them. I could see where a municipality could be a potential barrier, and unknowingly a barrier. So we need to make sure that all of those things are surfaced to our respective staff members, and that we as a council make sure that funding is allocated. I do believe we have increased our sidewalk budget for the current year, so that's good. That's correct. Is it enough? We'll want to know those sort of things. To that end, I'm going to go out on a suggestion here that perhaps we look at also partnering, perhaps staff could look into this, to partner with our counterparts within the township. My understanding is that they currently provide support through some of the passes for their clients through further accomplishing their general assistance mission. Could some of those dollars be put towards some of the infrastructure that's needed for ADA, particularly maybe in the areas that aren't the most far-reaching, where maybe there aren't sidewalks? Just explore all possibilities where the government entities, city, town, and townships, can do what we need to do to make sure that the infrastructure's there. Because that, to me, is part of the purview of this council and other governmental bodies. So those are my 3 areas that I'd like our council to focus on.
Thank you. Mr. Nord?
Thank you for coming in and talking with us tonight. I think it's good that all this is getting aired, and hopefully we can come to some sort of solution that works for everyone involved, because there are a lot of stakeholders. I do find it a little ironic that at the beginning of the meeting, we were giving some ADA recognition to the Easter seals. And then now here at the end of the meeting, we've got all these issues, well, not all, but quite a few issues around ADA issues. So it seems just a little ironic. A few questions. Some of it's just clarity. When you were speaking during the presentation, is the highest who are the highest priority, or please clarify the current highest priority purpose for Connect Transit in our community, not our future purpose, but as of today, what's our priority purpose?
It's serving those that are transit dependent in this community, and that's where our routes are aligned to when you're looking at that transit propensity model.
Good.
Can I just add a comment that for me, our care of the transit dependent is not a short-term thing. And so in order to take care of that population for the long term, we in a sustainable way, we have to think both immediately and long term. So I would just discourage you from thinking about now versus later, because it's all the same.
Oh, good. No, that's actually great, because I'm all on board with our transit being the core mission is those that are transit dependent, whether it's financial, whether it's physical, whatever that barrier is. Those are the core people that we're here to support. And then anybody else we can pick up along the way to help the system, that's fantastic. But our core mission, should be that, those groups of people. So thank you.
I just want to add on to that. I mean, this is a partnership with the city of Bloomington, with the town of Normal, McLean County Regional Planning, with the county of where are we building housing and developments at. It goes back to zoning and ordinances, and this goes back to sprawl. That all plays a factor in where and how we can serve the transit dependent in this community.
Sure, and yeah, with the future, that is definitely something we have to think about. Now,
And
with that
can I
being,
add just one more thing. Sorry, one thing that we left out is also quality. Is that just to provide something for someone, if it's poor quality, that doesn't do it justice. It has to be quality still. So again, that's what we're trying to kind of balance is providing service to everyone, but is it quality service? And we're trying to figure out the best way to do that with limited resources. So I
sure.
want to throw quality in there.
Yeah, because the resources are limited. I don't think it's realistic for at least me to think, or I hope a lot of people, that we would ever be able to get to a point where we could provide public transportation to the entire community. Realistically, we have to start with those who need and then expand from there. And the community is big. It's very, very big. But since we're on the same page then that providing service to the transit dependent is our main priority, we've got a lot of folks here who are transit dependent and have become very vocal. And we've got trailer parks that unfortunately kind of are the lower income areas and where folks that are transit dependent live that are now not being served and that are vocal. How do we get them service?
Yeah, so I think a lot of our issues, long-term issues, because as you know, by 2024, we're going to run out of federal funding. We are, at that point in time, going to have to seriously reduce service or look at some other, probably during the next few years, look at a different alternative funding source. That may be looking at additional funding from the town and city. It could be looking at a tax referendum, but we can't serve everybody at every single level. That's the problem we're at right now, because we're just not funded. We don't have unlimited resources. and those resources are being depleted.
Sure, but for the short term, I mean, I'm not talking 2024, I'm talking today. I mean, because we've got a real issue today. I don't want to tell the folks that have been, you know, well, like Ricky Lee had said, asking since 2015 or 16 to serve these areas. You know, what are we doing there?
What I'm trying to say is if we try to serve a different area now, who are we going to cut out a service from? What service are we going to cut to serve this new area? That's the issue that we're at right now, funding-wise.
Okay. Some areas had been served before and have been cut, and those were the lower income areas.
Yeah.
So we are it sounds like we're making the choice to cut service to the lower income areas for other
When you're looking at the
for other
transit
services.
propensity model, those areas aren't nearly transit dependent as the areas are focused in the core of Bloomington and Normal. Those are the far out. It goes back to sprawl and where we're building development at, low income housing at. Why are we building it at the far edges of this community where those people need to be, where the resources are?
Sure. I mean, we can't change the way that these neighborhoods were built. I mean, they're already built.
Yep.
So we just have to go with what we've got and move forward. Also, just something to point out in the MCPRP study on the 4th page where it has the key findings. Just to be clear for everyone here, in Normal, nearly 70% of Normal riders are under the age of 24. 52% are students. So that means the remaining 48% are non-students and are our residents, which students do have representation. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that our colleges are great advocates for them. You know, it's the remaining 48% that are our residents that we should be looking out for. So then another question is, well, this is more clarification because I think you answered it, that the term, well, that our rider types, we've got dependent and choice riders. Our higher priority is on the dependent riders over the choice riders, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And could you explain the history and the relationship that Connect has with ISU and how that works? Because they fund part of it, and my understanding is they get some passes for students. How does that whole relationship work? And
I believe that prior to me starting work at Connect Transit in 2007, I think it was 2002 maybe, Connect Transit approached ISU, or ISU approached Connect Transit to provide what's called universal access. So it's basically a program for ISU students. The students get what is called free transit service. However, the university is paying for that service.
so it's like unlimited rides?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, an unlimited ride pass. Do they pay the equivalent as to what a resident would pay for an unlimited ride pass?
Term like that pay for a $32 pass on a monthly basis, is that what you're saying?
Well, for the fixed route, is there an unlimited pass that residents can buy?
So the students use their student IDs and they swipe those on the fare boxes. So if they're not a student at ISU, obviously they wouldn't qualify to ride the bus. But if they're a student, their pass can be used, like I said, to swipe that, and it'll validate it on the fare box, and they can ride.
Yeah, which I guess that really wasn't what I was looking for. How about this? Do you have the numbers for how much ISU pays versus how many passes or how many swipes?
Mr. Nord, I'm going to circle back on this again. There's a lot of valid questions you're asking here, but we're talking about policy going forward, and we don't want to get into the weeds for the day-to-day operations
Okay,
of
then
Connect Transit.
Then I'll just get to the point of that one. Does ISU get a bigger discount than what our residents get?
So ISU pays a flat fee for ridership of their university students.
ISU students are residents of the town of Normal.
Okay. Then, I've been told that the Olive Route was originally not part of the 2016 restructure, and then it came on after the fact. Is that
Mr. Nord, I'm
accurate?
going to jump in on this one too. I think that was asked and answered in their presentation, why the Olive Route was discontinued. If you want to take that to a broader policy decision, in terms of what we're trying to do with, to make the most efficient transit system we can, I think that's a valid question. But I think the question multiple times on the Olive Route has been asked and answered.
Okay, 37,000 residents take the Olive Route. I think it's a lot of people that we should look at. So then, I guess another question then.
I want to clarify that. There's not 37,000 residents taking the Yellow Road.
37,000 rides, is that what it was?
Yeah,
Rides. And those are one ride per person because there's no transfer.
They can
have
transfer.
transfers.
They do?
Yeah, they can transfer to any route that it overlaps. So they transferred to the yellow, the pink, and the red, and the purple.
Okay. And the stops that are being utilized, those are going to be picked up by a different route? Is that correct?
They're already served by a different route. That's why it was duplicate service. So Walmart, OSF Fort Jesse, Larry and Charlotte on Shelbourne and Main Street, those are all covered by existing routes. The proposed pink would pick up those in Orlando Northbrook, where the most concern has been, for that quarter-mile to half-mile walk. So that's why we're going to take the pink over there and pick up the bulk of the ridership on that route.
The ARC Center and the trailer park that's just north of the ARC Center, is that being addressed by another route?
No. They would have to walk to the pink, which is 4 blocks away.
And these are our elderly?
Right now, they average around 1 ride a day.
Yeah, but in order for someone to get there, they have to get a transfer to the Olive Route to get on there.
Correct. I mean,
Okay.
Similar to all of our routes, again, we can't serve 100%. Anytime we move a route, it's going to affect a transit rider in some capacity. If we could go down every street, we could. We just don't have the funding for it. So again, decisions have to be made based on usage.
Sure, and these are our dependent riders that I'm pointing out.
But can I just jump in and and point out that they are non-riders at this time? We're talking about one rider from those locations today. And we're talking about a route that costs us $500,000 in a system that is resource constrained. So what we're trying to do is we are trying to address high rider areas with specialized pieces of other routes, rather than continue to run a bus that remains mainly empty past an area which may at some point be used. I would also point out that routes obviously change in the system. And so if we get to a place where there is a demonstrated need for a stop in those areas, we are more than happy to take a look at that just from a financially responsible point of view. It's hard to justify the stops right there. And I say that as a person whose place of work is right along the Olive Route.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you bring up that if somebody, or if there's a need for transit, that you guys will be looking to add them. The Landings has turned in a petition of nearly 100 folks that said that they would ride the bus. And then since then, some folks over at the Ironman Gardens have made a similar request, and that's a lot of people. So if you can look into that to get them service back, and also—
Mr. Nord, we're just not going there tonight on this. Again, we have talked about this. This is some of the things that this group is working on. These questions have been raised multiple times. We understand the issues. We don't need to keep readdressing these issues. Again, we're talking about policy. They've presented us figures. They've talked about solutions that they're working on, issues that they're working on, and these are issues for the working group to address. We're not going to solve those questions tonight.
Okay. The bigger, heavier buses, well, I assume they're heavier. Are the electric buses heavier?
They're lighter.
They're lighter? So then they'll actually be able to allow you to go to more places than the heavier buses? Is that true? It'll be able to add service?
I'm not sure what the question.
My understanding is whenever the current buses we have came about, that they were too heavy, too long, and there were some routes or some stops that we could no longer service because of the size.
Yeah, so we got away from going into every parking lot as much as we possibly could, due to safety reasons, concerns of bringing a large bus into that parking lot. Now, there are 2 areas in town that we are still servicing, such as the Target parking lot with transit service. But what is our option in that area? Set up a bus stop on Towanda? So those are things that we are considering and looking at. But that was the reason. We went out of parking lots all totally just from a safety standpoint.
Sure, but for our transit-dependent focus, getting close is a very important thing we need to look at as well. With the selection of the route, I mean, it could be the Olive, it could be any route, but
Mr. Nord, we're going to
there are
stop
other
this.
routes
We're
that
going to
have
stop
got-
this right now. Again, we're getting into the details of operation. That's not our goal here tonight. We are not the operators. We have acknowledged issues in the community and broader issues. That's what we're talking about. We're not going to micromanage routes here tonight and ridership. We're just not
Well,
going to do
it's not
that.
micromanaging. The question is there are other stops that have very little ridership. Are those being looked at?
Again,
to be
Mr. Nord,
eliminated?
we're not going down that path tonight. We're not going to go into the details of different routes. We're taking a policy approach to this, and this group is going to work forward on that, on the issues of individual stops, routes, things like that. This board and staff has acknowledged that there are issues and there are deficiencies. Many of them are due to funding. And so we're not going to solve that here at the table tonight, and so we're just not going there.
Okay, unfortunately, these issues, in my opinion, all should have been addressed at the Connect level and that should not have bubbled up to the town council level. Unfortunately, we're short one representative from Normal. Had that person have been there, possibly all these issues could have been resolved long ago, but this is the position we're in. As a town council, we've got the responsibility to appoint someone as a town representative, and so far, we're short one person.
Thank you.
And that's not a you guys problem, but that's a real issue. With the, concerns that have been raised, what do you guys propose going forward that should happen so that we don't have these issues coming up in the future? How can we solve this, move on, and then set something in place so that way this doesn't come up to the town council level again?
I think unlimited funding would probably be the only answer to that. I think, again, the way Connect Transit and transit in general is constructed, we're always going to have limited funding, and we're never going to be able to go anywhere. So anytime we make a decision, again, you're going to positively affect one person and negatively affect another, and that's always going to change. The only time people are going to be happy is if you're adding service. If we're changing, moving service, getting rid of service, people are going to be negatively affected. The addition of service is really the only thing that 100% people can be happy about. Right now, we don't have that option. I don't know what else we could do to satisfy 100% of the community, unfortunately.
Are you willing to sit with representatives from the community and come up with a solution that then you can present to the council?
Mr. Nord asked and answered. That was asked and
a yes?
answered.
The pink is our solution that we're taking to the board.
Oh, no, what I'm asking is, are you willing to go back and sit with members of the community, some of these leaders of the ADA folks, and sit with them and come up with a solution that then you can bring back with us? Or is this the solution?
Mr. Nord asked and answered. That's what the working
So
group
that's
is
the
about.
solution. Then you've got a lot of money for capital projects. Can that money be diverted to addressing the ADA stops sooner than what the current plan is to address them?
So our current plan is we're addressing 163 stops over the next 3 years, 120 over the next 2, and we are right now budgeted to spend $880,000 over the next 4 years.
Okay. Is there a way to get the ADA stops moved up in priority?
It's, again, goes back to we would need more funding.
I'm
Yeah, a
just
lot of
asking to
that's-
reprioritize.
A lot of that's timing. As we talked about in the presentation, there's many steps to go through to get even one stop certified. There's designing, there's easements, there's permits, there's contracting the work. It's literally just a matter of timing. You know, if we can find the funds. Right now, our issue isn't the funds, it's timing. 3-year process, what we put in those 3 years is about what we feel we can accomplish. If we felt like we could accomplish more, we would put it in there. We don't. It's very time consuming for staff. It's time consuming for the people that we hire to do the work. We just can't get it done fast enough.
I'm not asking to speed them all up, it's just reprioritize.
Mr. Nord, excuse me if I could interrupt, and Mr. Glaze, you can correct, but I think one of the points that was made during the presentation was while not the ideal solution, but it is a solution in the short term, that if a fixed route bus needs to stop at another location, that they can call, the rider can call and coordinate that with the office, and they will accommodate that. So that's at least a temporary fix until the ADA improvement can be made. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of that.
Yes, thank you. Then just please communicate that with the riders, so that way they know, because they're the ones that need to know that that's an option.
Mr. Nord, hold those thoughts, and I'm going to go to another council member. We'll come back to you. Mr. McCarthy?
Okay. Wow. That was a lot of information. I guess I want to start off by saying, as I try to when anybody comes to address us, thank you. Despite some very passionate opinions and seemingly adversarial viewpoints up here and members of the public and on the Connect Transit operation, I'm encouraged. I said this at another meeting. We weren't having these conversations because the municipalities weren't funding at the levels, and we couldn't do the things the transit system is now doing. We're struggling over what the improvements are. We didn't have bus stops before, and now we're trying to figure out how to make the bus stops better. I'm nothing but encouraged that we have so many people that are willing to come and express an opinion about what they need and what's missing and where our gaps are. Frankly, it's an efficient way for us to learn about the system, so thanks everybody for being here and sharing what's wrong with your access to the transit system. Transit presentation, holy cow. I knew a lot of it, some I didn't. I didn't know that we were $0 on the electric buses, that we're saving $8 million in outlay, and then $250,000 per bus over the life of the bus. Wow. You're talking about, you're talking about $2.5 to $3 million in savings in just these buses over the life of these buses, and not an $8 million outlay for diesel buses. Wow, that's a lot. Thanks for jumping on that opportunity to save taxpayer money. We really appreciate that. Did I understand those numbers right? Because that seems huge. Okay, we seem to be glossing over that, but as a guy who's responsible for spending taxpayer money, when you start talking about $10 to $12 million in savings, and we're not talking about that, holy cow, that's a ton of taxpayer dollars. So any other ways you guys can do stuff like that, you're gonna get my support. From a policy position, what can we do? What can we do as a council? I consider that in my role mostly the scope of what I can actually impact and fund. And so I heard a lot of things tonight. It's going to take me a while to sift through a lot of what I've heard. I've talked to disabled riders. I've talked to fixed route riders. I've talked to staff. I believe I've talked to some people from Citizens to Ensure Fair Transit. I'm still trying to understand
who contacted me and asked for a meeting, and I replied and didn't get a response. I'm still trying to figure out who they are. But I'm happy to talk to anybody I can. I'm trying to get as smart about all this as I possibly can to understand. A couple of things that what I understand so far. I don't claim to understand it all, but what I know so far about this is we need to continue to work on disability access to our transit system. Clearly, okay? It sounds like you're beginning to address this with work group, with some different bus opportunities. As you continue to make progress, I'm going to be looking to hear more about that and how that's evolving and what we can do. The thing we hear about here on the council and everywhere else, funding. Theoretically, funding would fix all of this. Principally, the municipalities are funding this system from a public input. We heard earlier, Ms. Smith made the point that we are not getting everything we could. I'm going to invite our other governmental partners to join the municipalities in funding the system. I come from a much larger system where all government entities fund, not just cities, so counties, townships, other governmental agencies that benefit from the system, that they in fact fund the system. And so I'm not suggesting that anybody has to raise taxes like the town of Normal did and the city of Bloomington did, but to help, it seems at this level, every dollar helps. And if I heard you right, 2024 is going to be a struggle for us, and a struggle that the town of Normal and the city of Bloomington cannot fill ourselves. So we're going to need help. We're going to have to look at what and how we're doing it as well, but we're going to need help when 2024 hits. So your point, Ms. Heil, about sustainable, now is okay, long-term is a problem. And so I appreciate that. I think McLean County Regional Planning's been brought up, the city of Bloomington's been brought up, businesses have been brought up. I think we as a body, when we start to look at zoning and code and right-of-ways and all of the things that are within our purview, those are the things that we can begin communicating with even more if we're not doing it well enough on our end. So as development happens in our community, our transit system and our municipalities and our development community, regional planning can work together so that we don't work in silos, that as the community evolves, so can the transit system, hopefully in tandem and lockstep. So whatever we can do on that side, if you're finding particular routes that are difficult, I know we doubled down and put a bunch of more money into sidewalks. So if there's one of those situations where there's a sidewalk and a gap and a bus stop, and the gap isn't managed by you and it's managed by us, it's certainly something that we, as a matter of policy and as a matter of funding that's within our control, that we can do. I'm open to hearing all about those things as well. I guess from a specific presentation points, really just one other one I wanted to talk about, and I make sure that I heard this right. You did it right at the end and kind of with a little fanfare, but so did I understand that the pink is now going to go over into Orlando?
Yes.
Did I hear that right?
Yep.
Okay. So that's been, from mostly what I've heard, mostly the biggest concern is that neighborhood, for some, particularly some disabled riders, in the neighborhood, that particularly with some of the sidewalk infrastructure. I was over there today, by the way, just at 1:30 this afternoon to have a look. I was really pleased. I don't know if we had anything to do with it or not, but the construction crews were over there working on the fixes to the curb cuts and the sidewalk repairs. I don't know if we had anything to do with speeding that up or not, but the construction crews were out there working on those this afternoon at 1:30 when I was out there. But that would seem to take or begin to address some of the issues that we've been hearing about the olive route. So I did hear that right.
That's correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure I didn't make that up and wasn't going to give him bad information. So, well, I'm super pleased to hear about that. Again, another point I think that just got glossed over and we didn't mention a lot. I've got other more detailed questions. I'll leave that to other stuff or other times when we have a little bit more time and haven't been at it. So thanks very much for your time and all the information.
I think, Mr. McCarthy, that your last question touched on an issue that Connect Transit struggles with, that they understand that there are gaps in their services and that there are things that they could do better if they had the funding to do it. And they understand that. I think that was very, very clear tonight. Mr. Preston.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor. I will, of course, start out thanking the 7 individuals who, about 2.5 hours ago or so, committed 3 minutes of their night to share their passion, to share their struggles, to share their opinions, and really, in a lot of ways, to share a glimpse into their daily lives with all of us and and our media friends here who are here as well. Excuse me. Thank you for coming and for speaking. Thank you for being passionate about this community, our transit system, and making it better for all of us in the community. A couple things that came up consistently in those 7 that I would like to highlight real quick. One is the focus on accessibility as it relates to individuals with disabilities. I was glad to hear in the presentation tonight of the focus with that and the initiatives with that moving forward. So thank you to the 3 of you up here at the big table presenting, talking about that. The other item that came that I saw some consistency with amongst the 7 who spoke at the beginning was the need for us to have full representation and fill that 3rd seat and final seat as a normal representative on the Connect Transit Board. That is something that I know while the appointment has not been made, the appointment will be made, and of course I look forward to that coming quickly and with somebody who is transit reliant or paratransit reliant for that matter. To bring that perspective to the board as one of our representatives. To the 3 of you, thank you. That was a lot of information. That was a lot of detail. And frankly, I'm sitting up here and kind of digesting this in my 3 full pages of notes, where lines have started getting overwritten by other lines because there was a lot of information that was shared. And as I'm digesting this, there is not anything that is coming to mind that I have heard in conversations and a number of conversations with individuals that as areas of concern that the 3 of you did not at least address. And it sounds like you're really working toward. And, maybe is it, to the extent and in the quick time frame as some people would like? I mean, of course not, right? And that's something that was part of your presentation. And I am glad to hear, though, that you guys are continuing to do great service and move in the right direction, addressing a lot of the concerns that we heard. So thank you for all that detail, and also thank you for having the listening ear of individuals who are transit reliant and continue to share their passion on Connect. One clarifying question that I have. So if I caught your guys' statistic right, it was toward the end that 53% of current Olive Route rides share a stop with another existing line. Is that correct? So with the pink route jotting over onto Orlando every other hour, if that proposal does get put into place, do we know what that 53% number goes up to in terms of current Olive Route compared to with the pink jot, how much of that is
guesstimate
served?
Probably 92-95%.
So we're guessing 92 to 95% of the total Olive Route rides will be served with the addition of that pink route jot over by either that or existing pink, or I think it was yellow. Is that right?
Yeah.
That also kind of overlaps.
Pink, yeah, and red. Red on the far east. Yes.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that is impressive. Good. I'm glad I asked. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. That's it.
A couple of people have brought this up tonight. I think it's worth me addressing is the vacancy on the board. I am not stonewalling on that. I am looking for people to do that. I had publicly asked people to submit information to me via email if they were interested in being on that board. So far, I've only heard from one, and that one person said they would not be available in the near term. And that's all I've heard at this point so far. So if people have, people are interested, please drop me an email with your background and why you want to serve on that board. Ms. Smith.
If I could, sorry, Ms. Smith, if I could just add to that, Mayor Coos, we do have a link on our website, www.normal.org, that someone can go in and fill a form to volunteer to serve on a board or commission. And with that, they provide some background about themselves. So once that's filled in, they hit submit, then it is automatically submitted. So.
Ms. Smith.
Several times it's been mentioned about 2024. What is the impact of that year? What is happening in that year that is so dire?
So Connect Transit receives a federal allocation of about $3.1 million. And this year, we're going to use 65% of that federal allocation on operations. By 2024, 100% of that federal allocation will be used on operations. We use about 15 to 18% of that in our operating budget now. So just factor in inflation. By 2024, we will use all of our federal money, and there's no more money to obtain. So we're using the federal money to leverage our DOPE money, our IDOT money, for that 65%. And that's why 2024 is so important.
The only other point I'd make is that while I applaud your efforts to come up with a workaround for the proposed olive route cancellation, I'd simply ask you to consider in a good faith effort to allow the working group time to factor all of that in, because as the one speaker indicated, to make a housing decision based on transit services that might be removed and later restored or is very disruptive. And you did a yeoman's effort in your prior interaction with the community. You mentioned 100 meetings and consultations. That this would give everybody involved a time to take a deep breath and be educated on it. And I understand there's one more Connect Transit meeting where you could make that effort. You're talking about $500,000 is the cost. Mm-hmm. The budget is under, the expenses are under. So the dollars should be there to support and do it in a way that is more conducive to community support and buy-in. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thanks for that comment, because it made me think of a question I was going to ask earlier. I was a little concerned about the value card issue in the discount structure, in the sense that if you bought a small card, you got a small discount. If you bought a big card, you get a big discount. And people that use those cards who are transit dependent and low income, they're not going to buy a $100 card because they don't have that in their budget. So I'd like the working group and the transit board to kind of look at that and try to find more equity in that value card for the riderships that use it. Mr. Nord?
On that note too, I think something that would be nice is thinking that not everybody has to pay the same amount. If you're below some certain threshold, whatever that threshold may be, maybe you pay less, and the folks that can't afford to pay more, and are simply choosing to take the bus, that they may pay more. Because I don't think everyone does need to pay the same. On the pink route, one last clarification. Is that route going every 2 hours? Is that what I heard? Okay, so that's, an hour was kind of the longest you wanted to go, and now that one's going to 2 hours. All right. I don't know if I have any other ones. If I understand the funding model correctly, if the municipalities give more money, you can maximize the money from the state. Is that correct?
Yeah, we can leverage more. We can leverage different additional funding from IDOT.
Okay. In the IGA, there was a section in there where it said that Connect can lease transit stations and put money towards walkways and bikeways, and I don't know if bikeways is right, but these other places. Is it possible then that some of the facilities that the town is paying to maintain, some of these bikeways and trails, that we could give those expenses to Connect along with the money that we're spending on that, simply so that way you've got the expense to get this matching money from the state?
Yeah, IDOT funding is basically strictly to provide transportation services. It's not for bikeways or trailways. There's limitations on what we can do with that IDOT funding.
Okay, possibly maybe we could lease you some of that space just to get you the expense, or space to, or lease you space here at the transit center to bring buses in, something to get you that expense, to get that extra money that's just laying on the table. Just consider that when you look at what you can do, because that would be a $0 solution to get you more money.
Yeah, I think that would increase our expenses. If we had to lease additional, we still have to come up with the 35%, even though IDOT's going to give us the 65.
Well, if we gave you the lease along with the money to pay that lease, then increased funding.
I think that would become a legal issue, actually, because we would basically be leveraging funds to not provide service, but to generate additional revenue through the state. I don't believe the state would like that.
Well, thank you, everyone, for the presentation and the discussion. It was very valuable. I'm going to have to go back and watch this on video because there was too much to absorb in one setting. So
True.
Thank you for the work that you're doing. Obviously, we're here to help with the working group and their efforts going forward. It's important to the community, I think. We have challenges. We have things that we need to do that we can't afford, so we've got to figure out how to, as you are trying to do, serve the most people in the best possible way. So thank you again for being here and presenting and giving us some pretty valuable information.
Thank you.
Our next item of business is a motion to approve reappointments to the Children's Discovery Museum Foundation. Those appointments were given to you prior in an email, I think, and could I have a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The appointments are approved. Mr. McCarthy, would you read those, please?
I don't have them.
Yeah, I actually don't have them either. I missed
Hang on,
the sheet.
hang on.
We'll give them a couple
I'm
seconds
pulling
to
up the
pull up
email.
that email.
Yes.
The Mayor Pro Tem got cut short here tonight.
That was our fault.
My
Sorry,
first
I
time reading, and they didn't give me the stuff to read.
Mhm.
Twice now, I've messed up in my Mayor Pro Tem duties, right out of the gate. All right.
I think he's got them, Eric. Thanks.
Yeah,
Did you find
I
them?
do. I found them. Thank you. Man, never gonna live this down. We have Patrick Bain. His term expires 6/30/22, initially appointed back in December of 2018. He's a third-generation farmer from rural Aerosmith. He was named America's Pig Farmer of the Year in 2018 by the National Pork Board, and he has a long history of working with Children's Discovery Museum educators during the annual 4-H McLean County Fair. He's a big advocate for education and pork industry standards. We have Marlene Dietz, wife of President Dr. Larry Dietz at ISU. Her term would expire in June 30th of 2022. She was first appointed in July of 2014. She's a retired owner of Dynamic Leadership Development, and she serves as the secretary of the Children's Discovery Museum Foundation. She's been an active leader in many, many volunteer efforts here in the community, and we're glad to have her. Mark Jontry, Was first appointed in March of 2013. He's been the regional superintendent with the Regional Office of Education. Many of us know him since 2008. He's worked in education for more than 20 years, and he serves as the treasurer and past chair of the Children's Discovery Museum Foundation. He's beginning his third term. Then we have Gina Mandros, who's been on the board, was first appointed in November of 2014. She's got a long history of working with local nonprofits and leadership. If you've been around Easter Seals for any period of time, you know she was heavily involved in Easter Seals and United Way. She's the Director of Advancement of Operations at Illinois Wesleyan University and currently serves as the chair of the Children's Discovery Museum Foundation.
Thank you. Before we go to motion to adjourn, are there comments or concerns? Motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
That was a quick one.
Oh, gotta turn this off.
Didn't flood it out down there?
They did. My wife called me today.
Did they close the gates there at Kirkwood?
That I don't know. In fact, the road in front of our house was shut down for the first time ever. They